Hello, 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 and welcome to Comrades and Farms here on the Truth Frequency Radio, usually TalkStream Live, iHeart, Tuned In, and also here on the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel. We're having some issues with Skype tonight on TFR, so it looks like we won't be live on TFR tonight. I know Chris is working vigorously in the background trying to straighten out the issue, but seems to be back again. Anyway, we're going to move on here. That's why we're streaming on multiple platforms, so because the show must go on, as he used to say in the old Pink Floyd song. Anyway, tonight we're supposed to have a guest, Brad Lauber from Lauber Seed Farms. He'll be joining us a little bit later in the show, assuming we can connect via Skype. Usually bring him in through the call board because my bandwidth is just horrible here. First, let me just say hello to everyone who's in the chat here, Geeky Gardens and Justin Goodearth. Good to see you guys in here. Always a pleasure. And I want to start out tonight. I kind of want to introduce the topic that Brad and I are going to be discussing later, assuming my bandwidth can sustain a Skype connection. I think it will, without the other connection to the studio. But I wanted to talk a little bit about a book that I picked up, I guess I should preface this by saying I usually don't buy books, and it's not because I don't like books, it's because I don't have a lot of time to read books, and I find it to be a tougher way to absorb information when I can listen to podcasts or live streams or replay streams while I'm working and doing other things. But I did pick up a new book recently. About a month ago I bought this, and I still haven't gotten around to reading it because that seems to be how things go around here. I've just been so busy I haven't had a chance to, but I'm planning on reading it over the winter. And the reason I bought this book is because it's written by a man named John Kempf, who I've talked about several times before, and I will probably continue to talk about ongoing. John Kempf is the founder and head of a company called Advancing Eco Agriculture, and they're all about regenerative agriculture, and they have a tremendous educational program both on YouTube, and they also have not a seminar. I want to say seminar, but it's not a seminar. It's a regenerative academy, which you can go to as well. But anyway, without getting too sidetracked on that, I usually don't buy books, but I did get this one because this book was written by John Kempf. I think it's the first book he's ever released. I'm going to show it here on the camera. It's called Quality Agriculture, and it's volume 1 by John Kempf. And thank you, Geeky, for providing the link on Advancing Eco Agriculture. I usually, like I said, I usually don't buy books, but this man has provided me so much information. And in fact, John Kempf has been a big part of my inspiration in regenerative agriculture and in my educational advancement. I have learned so much from Advancing Eco Agriculture, both through their oh wow, that doesn't show up on the green screen, huh? Both through their YouTube channel and also through their webinars and many other forms and facets. They've also been part of the Northeastern Organic Farmers Association nutrition conference that happens every year. I unfortunately don't have the budget to participate in those conferences, but I do go back and listen to the archives. They post the archives later on the bionutrient food organization website, which is bionutrient.org. You can go to the media library there and look at their download and listen to. You can see their slides and you can see the audio from those conferences, and boy are they a wealth of information. Anyway, I stumbled across John Kempf at the Northeastern Organic Farmers Association, the 2013 edition, and he was talking about a lot of really innovative and wonderful things, and I just really brought me into regenerative agriculture. Before that, I was into organic farming, but I was not part of the regenerative agricultural movement, and I wasn't aware of all the capabilities and all the wonderful benefits of regenerative agriculture. Anyway, the book is called Quality Agriculture: Conversations about Regenerative Agronomy with Innovative Scientists and Growers by John Kempf, Volume 1. And I'm just going to read the back of it here real quickly. And Brad, I see you're in the chat here from Grow the Farm Up. I just want to say we're going to have to connect via Skype. The TFR studio is having some issues with Skype, so we'll have to connect directly via Skype. I'll give you a buzz, or you can give me a buzz in a minute here. I just want to finish this little bit here. So I'm just going to read off the back of the book to you briefly. An increasing number of farmers and scientists believe the foundational ideas of mainstream agronomy are incomplete and unsound. Conventional crop production ignores biology in favor of chemical interventions, leading farmers to buy inputs they don't need. Fertilizer recommendations keep going up. Pest pressures become more intense. Pesticide applications are needed more often, and soil health continues to degrade. However, innovative growers and researchers are beginning to think differently about production agriculture systems. They have developed practices that regenerate soil and plant health and that deliver much better results than mainstream methods. Using these principles, growers are able to decrease fertilizer applications, reduce disease and insect pressure, hold more water in the soil, improve soil health, and grow crops that are more resilient to climatic extremes, increasing farm profitability immediately. And I can attest to that, me personally. As a leading agronomist and teacher, Mr. John Kempf has implemented regenerative agriculture systems on millions of acres across many different crop types and growing regions with his team at Advancing Eco-Agriculture. In Quality Agriculture, John interviews a group of growers, consultants, and scientists to describe how to think and farm differently in order to produce exceptional results in the field. Their remarkable insights will challenge you, encourage you, and inspire gratitude and joy for the rewards of working with natural systems. And I'll just read the little bio on him too here. John Kempf is an entrepreneur, a speaker, a podcast host, and a teacher. He grew up on a fruit and vegetable farm in Northeast Ohio and has developed nutrition management systems that regenerate plant and soil health quickly, resulting in strong economic returns for growers. As the founder of Advancing Eco-Agriculture, Crop Health Labs, Ozadia, and the Regenerative Agriculture Academy, he is passionate about the potential of well-managed agricultural ecosystems to reverse ecological degradation, bringing joy and profit to producers. John's mission is to have these regenerative models of agriculture management become the mainstream globally by 2040. And this is an excellent introduction to our guest tonight, who's going to be on. It's Brad Lauber from Lauber Seed Farms. He is pretty much the independent seed producer here in the United States, and he's one of the few people who hasn't been beaten down by the big ag systems, shall we say. At least that's my perspective on it. Now, I want to catch up on the chat here very briefly. I see Brad has also come in, and Brad, I'll give you a call in a moment, or whenever you're ready, just let me know in the chat and I'll give you a buzz. And I want to say hello to Marie Bond and Vinny Barbarino. Vinny, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate the super chat. That's so generous and kind of you. Thank you so much. Very glad to have you along. Yeah, okay, so I think that's everybody in the chat. So Brad, I don't know if you're ready to go yet or not, but if you are, just let me know in the chat here and I'll give you a buzz. And if you're not, we'll give you a little bit more time. Anyway, tonight, Brad and I want to discuss a few things about food and how it relates to food labeling. We did sort of touch on CRISPR the last time Brad was on, and we've sort of opened that conversation a little bit, but we're going to just kind of dial it back and get back to some of the basics here. We want to stay on a level that we can connect with consumers on. So here's something to think about for you, and we want to get some feedback from the audience actually about what you want to see for food labels and in your food systems. So a little bit about the transition from conventional commodity agriculture to regenerative agriculture. Like what's the realistic timeline, right? And how do we incentivize regenerative ag, or how do consumers incentivize regenerative ag? And we also want to ask some questions about food labels, just simple things like, what do you think about the food labels that you see today? Do you trust those food labels? And what would you like to see on food labels in the ideal world or in the future as we go? And it looks like Brad is ready to go, so I'm going to go ahead and fire the Skype chat over here. So if you'll just bear with me for a moment, we'll get connected.
On food labels in the ideal world, or
hey Brad, how are you?
Good. I am hearing you. Are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you, but let me just make sure I got you into the. I got to grab you from Skype here in OBS Studio, which is always a nightmare. I wish there was an easier way to do this. Got to grab it from NDI. Yeah.
Always got to be something.
Yeah, the technology is always the challenge or advantage, depending on your perspective or the time of day. Here, let me just pull you in here. Local live. I think this is you. Let's see. Did that come through? Why is that not working? Maybe that's not it. Let me remove that one. Yep. And then add a new source. NDI source. And local Skype. I think maybe this is it. Let's see if that's it. I don't know. Let's see if people can hear you. Can people hear Brad on here? Brad, can you give us a 1, 2, 3?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay, YouTube, can you just let me know if you're hearing Brad? And let me... I don't know why.
Testing 1, 2, 3 to all the natural folks out there.
You guys hearing Brad? I gotta add something here in the mixer, I think. Why is it not coming through? Oh, they say yes, they can hear you. Well, if you can hear them, that's great. Awesome. I hear Brad a bit lower volume than me. Okay, that's all right. As long as you guys can hear me, I can turn my volume down a little bit, and that'll stabilize that. Oh yeah, and you need to turn your YouTube volume down in the background there, just so it doesn't double through. But it looks like they can hear you.
Yeah,
So
I noticed that. Sorry, my bad. I noticed that. I went whoops. I muted my YouTube. So hopefully my amateurism is over for the.
Well, that's all right. We're both expressing our amateurism tonight, so it's all good. Anyway, glad to have you back here on the show. And I know you wanted to talk about food labeling a little bit, and I know you had questions for the audience. So I don't know. Is there? Do you want to just take it away, or what?
I tell you what, CJ, I'm really super excited to be back with the all natural folks here, Farmacy Seeds Network. I've been hunting around for a channel about this size, run by somebody with an open-minded host that's got a good show. And really, I commend you for cultivating the conversation in the chat as good as you cultivate the crops. How do you like that little? See what I did there?
Wow,
that's tricky, wasn't it?
Boy, that's a big old golden badge on my chest as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if people don't know, Brad is pretty much the #1 independent seed producer here in the U.S., and he's fought hard to become and maintain that position. So. That's no small compliment in my book, but thank you very much. I'm very honored to have you on as a guest.
Well, I appreciate that. And as I had a moment, I was just quickly watching a little bit of last week's show, as I didn't get a chance to jump on live or chat or anything. We had so much going on around here. But as I had a chance to rewatch it a little bit over the weekend, and I was just scanning through it, kind of jumping through it, I have to tell you guys, everybody in the chat, and Carlton, I was absolutely blown away with the chat questions and conversations. I will say this is one of the best channels I've found. This is basically a sample audience for what our nutrient-dense, identity-preserved marketplace business is really set up for. I mean, you guys are the customers that we bet on 10 years ago. It's saying, these are the people that are going to be looking for healthy, higher nutrient-dense natural food, and I'm really wanting to interact with the comments, and I've got many questions for the audience and also for you, CJ. And folks, let's do it. I mean, let's address the chats, ask away, and of course, I've got some topics in mind as they fit the conversation, and I promise none of them have anything to do with politics. Double promise.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, we can leave that at the door. I hope anyway,
We've
unless
had enough of
somebody
that.
wants to, just make a smart alecky comment about it in the chats. We're good with that. But some topics address some of the comments from last week's show that I've got. I kind of just chatted or jotted a couple of things down, but you know, CJ, we've talking, and for those of you listening and watching, you ever run into somebody in life, either you meet them in person or online, and you get to know them a little bit, and then you get to know a little bit better, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, you do that too, the same as me, and then a couple days later, you realize, oh, wow, okay, you do that the same as me too, and then you realize how much you have in common. And there has been quite a bit of conversation back and forth between Carlton and myself in the last couple of weeks about some pretty deep content and some various different things that he kind of brought up in last week's show. And that really, I think, Carlton, we've talked the talk, and let's walk the walk. We're all about including the consumers, and thought is you in the chat in the audience, reach out to anybody that you know, and let's what do you guys want? What do you guys want to discuss tonight? What questions do you have for me? And I'll just add one last thing and let Carlton take it away and let the chat questions roll in. Carlton has an exceptional way of explaining a lot of things that I don't understand. I've learned a lot from him. Just little things like enzymes, in the saliva and things of this nature. I'm not a human biologist. I'm a plant biologist. I'm a soil scientist and plant pathologist. And really, what I found is that he's been kind of filling in some of the blanks of what I've been perhaps not necessarily missing, but really increasing my understanding of how these higher nutrient dense foods are actually breaking down in the body. And so I really commend the channel, and I'm super pumped to be back. And so, you know what, guys, let's just do it. Hit us with it, and let's go from there.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think we talked about this the last time you were on, but I started my journey here into regenerative agriculture in 2013, and before that, I had been into farming and organics, and I just didn't realize the potential of regenerative agriculture. And that whole thing about tying it to human health, that goes back to John Kempf and Dan Kittredge and those guys. Those guys are excellent teachers. And I gotta be honest, I didn't give a damn about my health at all. Well, I mean, not didn't give a damn, but I just didn't. It wasn't on to, how much effect you could have on your health through nutrition, and how much negative effect you could have through bad nutrition or chemicals in your food supply. And those guys really turned me on to that, and that's when I started actually paying attention to health. And I have to say, my energy levels and my happiness and my overall sense of well-being is greatly improved since I started paying attention to those things. And that's what really drove me to tie those two pieces together between the regenerative agriculture and how that translates out to human health through enzymes and trace mineral nutrition and biology and all that kind of stuff. So this is a great entrance to the conversation, and I'm really glad to have an opportunity to bring this conversation out to consumers so they can tell us what they want to see in the food supply. Because at the end of the day, somebody like you who's breeding the seeds that are going to be planted for the future food supply, it's important that you're paying attention to that. And I think it's great that we have, an independent seed breeder left, because the market's sort of been flooded with some other things that are, in my opinion, not so great. But let's see what the audience has to say about it. What do you people think? What would you like to see on your food labels? Do you trust your current food labels? What would you like the future of food to look like for you? Go ahead.
That's a great question that I kind of have in my mind too. What do you guys think about the current food labels that you're looking at when you go shopping for food. And, how much does farming practices influence your food purchasing decisions? That's a deeper question. And it leads into, how we transition operations to regenerative ag. But let's skip back just for a moment. What is your guys' opinion of the current food labeling system? That would be really the first question that anybody take a shot at that. I'd definitely really like to get some feedback on a couple of different people's opinions on that.
I agree, and this question is directly targeted to you guys in the chat. Tell us what you want to see. Tell us how you feel about current food labels. Do you trust those? What are your opinions? This is your chance to this is your chance to put input into what the future of agriculture can be, and a chance to provide yourself alternative options to what's currently on the market today. So fire away in the chat. We'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to know how you feel. I know for me, when I go into the store and I look at labels really closely, and I find that even if you just read the label and you think things are okay, you got to know a lot of the background behind all this stuff. Like, for example, a lot of the products have canola oil in them. Well, you go and drill down on that. A lot of this canola is GMO, and it's grown with a pretty significant amount of pesticides in the field. So you go and buy a bag of potato chips thinking you're buying just organic potato chips, and they put canola oil on it and it's not organic. Well, now you haven't eliminated that from your food supply. So I'm very scrupulous, or very.
There's a very interesting one from Kylie Victoria. When I lived in the States, this is out of the chats, Carlton.
Yeah,
when
awesome.
I lived in the States, I noticed the food labels were very different than they are in Canada. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit without diving into every last detail? I am curious what I guess quick differences you could explain in a YouTube chat. That's an intriguing question to me.
I'll second that, because I didn't realize they were so different, and I know nothing about the Canadian food chain or food labeling system or any of that.
There's another good question. Do you want imports to show the same labeling?
Excellent.
And boy, that's one of those our buy USA. We've been working on what I call fully traceable audit trails of all of our production practices, and we're actually working on putting it, I think we discussed this a little bit, into an app. And it, I don't think it adds a lot of cost. But if you could literally take your smart device and scan it over a food label, and you could see, what type of seed was used to plant it, the origin of the seed, what farming practices were used to grow it, if perhaps there were any herbicides sprayed on it, when were they sprayed, and what are the links or the current most up-to-date information about those herbicides. How was it harvested? Was it did it go through an identity preserve system, or is it a quote open preserve system? I mean, there's a lot of different things that you could scan and look into, and we're just like 18 months away from really starting to put a secondary label, which kind of transitions into the operations transitioning to regenerative farming. And I kind of jump into and explain how I help farms transition and how it takes a few seasons, and that's something that we can kind of discuss as the questions roll in. But let me take a minute, and you probably as well, Carlton, and read a couple of questions. If you want to read a couple of them, it looks like we're good.
Yeah,
really good feedback.
They're rolling in here. Yeah, Justin Gooder says, I don't know what I'm reading most of the time, and I don't trust any of them, even the organic stuff, organic in air quotes. And that's a great point. And then Kylie says the differences are there are far fewer ingredients in Canadian foods, whereas American labels would have so many strange ingredients. Geeky Garden says when organic allows certain levels of chemicals, I can't even think of it as organic. And Portable Tree says it seems as though there are loopholes concerning what may constitute as being organic, and that ties right into what you're talking about that traceable labeling food chain. That takes it right back to when the seed was bred, what it was grown, conditions under. I mean, I guess I should let you talk about it. You're way more familiar than I am, but I love this concept that we can trace it right back to where it started and know the entire chain. I think that's really important for authenticity of food labels.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, we've been for years not only researching but setting up a food label that people can trust. And it's not about marketing, it's simply about tracing every process. Okay, your food label will pop up and say, okay, it was planted with an organic seed. The seed was grown organically, it wasn't a chemically grown, not just non-GMO seed. And then the product was grown organically, and no herbicides or pesticides were applied. And just little things like that. As I'm reading through the chat, it appears that a lot of what I see on food labels and my opinions and thoughts on food labels, it seems like many people are commenting the same, that hey, America and most food companies, our food labels are, for lack of a better term, kind of trash. I mean, they've got basic data on them, so let's not chuck them out. I mean,
yeah.
Before we have a better solution, let's not eliminate the old one. But
yeah.
I kind of second the sentiment I'm reading here in the chat, so that's good stuff. Okay.
Yeah, same here. I feel the same way about it. I find it very hard to trust, even when I read the label, that that it really authentically represents what's in the package.
Justin Good Earth's got a good one. I wish we would hold our food to the high standard we do for our crops here in Oregon. Yeah, I'm known to roll a cigarette of my own from time to time, probably from Colorado, as I'm in Nebraska.
It's clear, gotta get local, right? Local as you can.
Oh, it's great. 2020, for as much strangeness as it has, at least we're waking up on that front. I mean, and that's really kind of what it's all about. People ought to be able to make their own choices. And how can you make your own choices if you're not being properly informed?
Fact.
So that's really, Carlton and I have really discussed quite a bit of topics going back and forth the last couple of weeks as we've had time. And that's one of the biggest things that really of all of the folks in my circle, and one of the reasons my business is, kind of, not just kind of, but really booming in a depressed ag economy, is that we're providing those things. I mean, we are going out, seeking out end market users, just like you guys here at the Farmacy Seeds Network, asking you what you want, and then we go grow it. If you want me to give you every single piece of data about how your food product was grown, I sure can. It might cost you a little more.
I can bury you in information, right?
Yeah, but at what point it's like going to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription. They give you a 38-page packet of information. I mean, I think a good start is a simple, at least a 1-page, 2-page, maybe like a 3-page that handle. That's kind of what I've settled on, a 3-page that handles 3 basic, what's the type, which would be organic, non-GMO, GMO. What's the nutrient density for page 2? Maybe that ought to be page 1, and then page 3, farming practices. I mean, that's basically kind of what I've settled in on for what I think would be. You guys tell me in the chat. I mean, am I way off base there? Would would you, if you walked into a supermarket and saw a regenerative independent third party label that this product was regeneratively farmed and truly regeneratively farmed with an audit trail that shows what cover crops were planted at what date? I mean, we can. It's really not that hard, guys. I mean, we have GPS equipment in all of our tractors and planters and harvesting equipment that's already keeping track of all of this.
Yeah, everything's already tracked. You just got to convey it to the consumer, right? I mean, like, how hard is this really? I mean,
it really is a matter of like about 6 hours and a good coder. I mean, that's what it took us.
Yeah.
It's you got to know what parameters you're looking for.
You want to take like all that data and condense it down to something that's like usable and understandable for the consumer too, right? Like, I mean, I know even here on my farm, the amount of data that I have, like if you were to ask me something, like I can overwhelm you with data, but what we really want to do is take that down and trace it, like Justin said back a few lines ago, trace it seed to sale and convey that information to the customer so they can actually verify. And I like the concept of the independent third party so that, there's not a financial tie in here. That seems to be a huge problem in so many of our systems here,
Well, and another good question on the food label front, and then maybe we can, scooch on. There's so many good topics to discuss with this audience. Let's not get lost in one for an hour and a half. And after the last time I was on the show, Carlton, feel free to just yell at me and say, "Hey, Brad, shut up. There's a commercial coming up." We were joking. Once you get me on a topic I'm pretty passionate about, I'll just keep going because I'm too lazy to quit, as the preacher said, right? That is one thing that on the food label front that really is like you say, tracked from seed to sale, and it's a matter of basically downloading the field tracking information onto an app that we are developing and that you can scan with your smart device, and you download the app and it's free. And we are like, I was hoping to get it off the ground 2021, and there's a very good chance we might be able to, but there's so many slip-ups. And then the question I've got is, you guys, all food is overseen a little bit by the FDA and the USDA. Does it give you guys more or less confidence to see a USDA and FDA sticker on this? Or would you think that keeping it completely private and kind of out of the hands of the corporate monoliths and essentially the corporate monopolies that write their own rules? Now, I think the independent third party would kind of need, that's why I like the idea of a private independent third party.
Yep.
Because their objective, if they screw up, they get fired.
Yep.
If the USDA screws up,
they bury it. They just bury it. Yeah.
Right, and so that would be, and that's something that we can come back to. We'll jump around a little bit here today, but just kind of to keep the show rolling. How are we doing on time now that I know you're such a big time show operator? You've got commercials and stuff, man. So
well,
let me know how we're doing.
Here's the funny thing about that tonight. The station has been having issues with Skype, and so when I went to connect to TFR tonight to host the show over TFR, I was unable to connect. So we're only on YouTube tonight, so you can talk at will, and I'm not going to interrupt you with stupid commercial breaks. So you're totally free reins, rock and roll. Say what you want to say, ask what you want to ask. It's all yours, man. Take it away. Carry the discussion however you want, and I'll support you in any way that I can. You tell me what you need.
Well, I tell you what, let's go a little bit to the transitioning operations large-scale farming operations to regenerative practices for a minute. And if you see any good comments pop back in about food labels, feel free to interrupt and read them out loud, because the last question we asked about, are you more comfortable with the USDA involved, or would you rather have it private? It's an important question, and if something pops up and I miss it, feel free to jump back in. But kind of as we're waiting for that reply from some folks, because that's probably something to think on. I kind of want to explain to you guys how I help farms in my area transition from conventional commodity agriculture to regenerative farming. And it takes a few seasons, guys. And basically how it works is the average farm size in my area, let's just say for simplicity's sake, is 2,000 acres. Or they farm 10 150 acre fields. In my area, for whatever reason, everything's cut up into squares and circles. Pivots run in circles, and it's mile by mile. It's just, if you've ever flown over Nebraska, you look down and you go, what is going on down there? It's just all circles and squares.
So true. I've driven through there.
It's just what it is. There's not a crooked road in this state. I mean, we always kind of joke about that. But, a lot of times what happens is operations, and this is one of, and I bring this up because this is one of the biggest things that is holding back operations from transitioning to regenerative. Consumers need to understand that it takes a couple of seasons, a few seasons. And a lot of times I've worked with some good operations, and what they'll do is, let's say they're farming 10 150 acre fields. So that'd be 1,500 acres. Okay, let's go with that number for simplicity's sake, all right? And so what they'll do is they'll try a half of one field or one field the first year. And like everything, when you try it the first year, you have successes and setbacks. That's why a lot of folks will ask us to come out and do some consulting on it, because we've had the trials, and we've screwed it up every which way that you possibly can, and so we know some of kind of the pitfalls to avoid. And really, it comes down to how do we get the consumers to incentivize essentially the transition to regenerative ag. And I think consumers need to understand that, a farming operation of this size that's just growing commodity corn and soybeans cannot in one season just switch to be totally regenerative. And so it's almost a process where the consumer and the farmers need to work together and understand that it's a couple year process. And so long as consumers can kind of help facilitate that, that's really the biggest thing holding back operations from transitioning to regenerative. I think I've got about 25,000 acres in southeast Nebraska that I've helped transition from, no cover crops, no regenerative, just putting on anhydrous ammonia and herbicides. And of those 25,000 acres, I'd say about 5,000 to 7,000 acres of them are now fully regenerative, to where there's just very little small amounts of commercial fertilizers supplemented as needed. And the other 17,000 acres or whatever it would, give or take, is in a transition period where okay, they're doing cover crops now, and they're getting their organic matter up. And so it's just something that I wanted to kind of bring up with you guys, that transition, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. If we could get, basically most of America's cropland into a regenerative rotational grazing program, that I think we would really see a large amount of carbon sequestration. And there's actually some programs out there now. I don't know if you call them carbon credits or whatever, but they're working on to figure out how much carbon you sequester per acre. And essentially, I don't really like to use the USDA, what's the word I'm looking for? Not supplement, subsidy. There we go. Let's just add another subsidy to it. I'd like to see the regenerative system stand on its own. But
Yeah.
there are some programs out there that, if you have this much foliage in your cover crop system, we estimate you are sequestering X amount of carbon, and that is worth X amount of dollars. And so, that I think is the way that consumers can really help incentivize operations to transition to regenerative ag practices. And I mean, it's coming. It's an inevitability. But you said it really well in your last episode. We're kind of working in a degenerative system, not a regenerative system now.
For sure.
And as these guys transition over, guys and girls, I guess, I got to be politically correct, right? Oh, whoops! I said politics. You throw me off. Right? But
I'll never throw you off, Brian. You keep speaking truth. I can't throw anybody who's speaking the truth off a show. I can't do it.
I appreciate that, but no, it's just something to consider as you're a consumer and you're walking through the grocery store and you're going, well, gosh dang it, why aren't these farmers transitioning to why don't they just transition to regenerative? The whole dang thing next year, it'll solve all our problems. I'm just simply pointing out it's not quite that simple. It takes a few seasons and a little patience on the customer front and understanding the systems that we need to get in place to incentivize farmers. The incentive's already there, just farmers that have been growing conventional commodity
purely
style.
Economically, if nothing else, right? I mean,
yes. Most of what I've found is everybody that I've helped transition after a couple of years are like, why did we ever farm any other way?
Yeah.
And then they're off and running, and I'm like, I'm going back to my farm. I'm busy. Good luck, and give me a call.
Yeah.
If you need something, awesome. You get it. You're rolling. And then there's some kind of more stubborn guys that you work with, but that's okay. I mean, they're, oh gosh dang it, my yields weren't that good this year. They're down again. I mean, that's the dirtiest little secret.
They get stuck in that paradigm.
Yep, they do. And I don't have enough money to afford to put on cover crops, and you're sitting there going, oh man,
you're costing yourself money on ferts and all this other stuff that you could replace that with cover crops and take gains. And I don't mean to interrupt you here, but we do have a comment here from Geeky Gardens. He says, I like the idea of getting out of the government agencies where possible, but would definitely want an independent middleman to cut out the greed factor. So it looks like that third-party certification is very much in line with what people are thinking here. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
No, that's perfectly fine, and that's good, and I'm glad to hear that. We've done quite a bit of that, to where I'll bring in a independent third party to basically audit my stuff, and I've worked with 3 or 4 different auditing agencies. A couple of them I really liked. A couple of them were, for lack of a better term, real pricks and didn't understand at all what we were trying to do, but
Yep.
Nonetheless, you work within the confines that you need to. It's a little bit, it's not necessarily like organic certifying, but when you're talking about privately certifying a food label, that's no small thing. I mean, they're the hoops to jump through, and they should be there, because we're talking about food. I mean, you and I have talked about this in our correspondence back and forth. I mean, the golden rule. Would I eat it? Would I feed it to my kids? Well, if the answer is no,
then what the hell are you doing it selling to somebody else? Like, yeah.
Right.
It's funny.
Exactly.
It's funny. I heard John Kempf talking about that. Like, the reality is, a lot of these farmers are, they farm commercial production, and then on the side they have a garden that their family eats from. And it's like, wait a minute, so you won't eat the food you're producing that you're selling, you actually go and eat food that's not what you're producing? So you know what you're doing, you're complicit in this. Like, it's really frustrating to see that and to hear that. And it's like, yeah, it goes back to the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if you wouldn't eat it, what are you doing feeding it to somebody else?
Well, and that's just kind of one subject that I wanted to bring. I thought it would be a good subject to kind of bring up. There's about 3 kind of bullet points in there of transitioning to regenerative, and I think I don't want to call it carbon credits, but they're kind of familiar with that terminology. And who pays that stupid carbon credit?
This turns into a tax again, right? Like,
there you go. Well, you know who pays for it? It's, at the end of the day, it's going to be the consumer.
Yep.
And realistically, now, if regenerative farming lowers the cost and the risk profile of producing food like fivefold. Let's not give it, too much. Let's take what we think and cut it in half.
Right. We're being totally generous at fivefold, right?
Right. Exactly. And so you're going to see a cheaper, healthier, and more nutrient-dense food supply, but maybe and that's another question I've got for you guys in the chat. For a fully independent, third-party, traceable audit trail food label, what is a reasonable amount of money? There is some cost there. Is it 3% of the total cost of the food? Is it 7%? Would you pay 10%? 20% seems awfully high to me. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know.
It does to me too. But if it was that, would you pay it? I mean, for me, if I could afford to pay 20% more to guarantee my food was certified clean, seed to harvest, and I knew that was a reliable, dependable, ethical, trustable source, yes, absolutely, and I wouldn't even think twice about it. I mean, for me, that answer is so fast, like.
Yeah, and you know what? A lot of people would. I mean, the 20% line, especially when you look at the fact that the actual food you're purchasing is cheaper than what you're looking at now. Believe it or not, that 20% mark is not out of line. And so I always look at that and say, okay, let's cut it in half. And 10%, okay, I could deal with that. I mean, just like you say, I mean, if you want to get a large percentage of people doing this, so that's just a question I've got for you guys. A couple of you in the comments throw out say, no, heck no, I ain't paying 20% more for a label, or my suspicion is a lot of folks will say, not really, cost be danged, but whatever the cost to guarantee the food supply or the food that I'm purchasing has exactly the nutrients and is grown exactly the way that I want it and is everything exactly that I want and nothing that I don't want, that's really kind of priceless. I mean,
the value of that is way more than the 20% you're going to pay extra. And there's a comment here from Justin from back before we were having this discussion. He says, hell yeah, would love it and wouldn't have any trouble paying a little more either.
And so that kind of, I always hate to, it's really easy to spend other people's money, right? It's really, here, I got this great idea, and if I can just take all my brains and all your cash, we're going, and it's like, wait a minute, no, it's really easy to spend other people's money, so I'm always really cautious about it. But that is essentially the model. I mean, I've lived it for 10 years and transitioning, and that is the model that will work. And I mean, at the end of the day, I would avoid the terminology as a tax, but really more like you're kind of paying for the information. And if you want a little bit of information, maybe that number's 2%. If you want a lot of information, maybe that number's 10%. And if you want every single piece of data, maybe that number's 25 or 30%. You choose for yourself. We don't have to just have one food label.
Right, you could have a couple different levels for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Especially with the technology we have today, right? I mean.
Exactly, and like I say, the 3-page app that we're working on is the simple version, and then we've got like a 10-12 page app, and then there's a 127-page app. But honestly, guys, I'm on like page 4, and I kind of just put it down because I figured I would get the first 2 simple ones working first, and then move on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's see. Let's have a look at the comments here. Geeky Garden says, last I heard, we only had one planet to work with. We need to get away from degenerative ag and move to regenerative just to keep it livable. And, I just want to pause on this point here while we're having this discussion. You mentioned the carbon thing. There is a lot of misinformation about carbon sequestration out there. And, I'd like to just dispel a few of those myths real quickly. People say that, raising cows is like this huge, negative effect on the carbon cycle, right? But, when you go into regenerative agriculture and you put those cows out on grazed pasture rather than sticking them in a feed lot and doing this whole grain-fed, cram them in a lot thing, it's a whole different animal, pardon the pun, but, all of a sudden you're sequestering carbon because you're building the soil health and you're making plants grow faster and quicker, and that increases photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is the basis of carbon sequestration. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly because I see all sorts of myths and all sorts of misinformation about that. And I don't know if you wanted to go into that more or not, but I wanted to pause on that because that's one thing that really irks me is I see that conversation go sideways where people, oh, the cows are producing methane and killing the atmosphere and they're going to kill us all. And it's like, no, not in a regenerative system. They're not. In the current feedlot system, yeah, it's a negative thing. But, I don't know. Do you have any comment on that?
Current feedlot system can be almost a little bit toxic. There's no question about
for sure.
That. I really like. I really appreciate when you come in and lay out an idea like that and really jump into the carbon sequestration and kind of try to dispel some of the myths because I feel like getting to know you over the last month or whatever it's been, you've got a lot of credibility, and it's because you talk the talk and walk the walk, and so when it comes out of somebody like your mouth, people at least I do, I look at it and go, okay, that means there's something there. It's like everybody, he may not be 100% right, but you got to know he's at least 70-80% onto something. So pay attention, y'all. And that you're exactly right. And even if you still want to feed them a little corn, some of the high nutrient dense non-GMO corn out in the pasture, great. Throw out a little feeding trough, and they can walk by as they're eating their grass, and they can eat a little corn if they want. Sure. It's kind of the same theory, but yeah, let's unpack them out of 10,000 head in a 5-acre period to the point where they have to pile the waste matter.
Yeah.
And we joke, we've got a couple feed yards around here, and one of the jokes is our father always used to tell us, if you don't behave, I'm going to make you eat the leg meat from the knees down. Cows that are standing out there in that feedlot, and you look over and you're like, oh man, standing in 3 foot of their own. Yeah, that's not good. Okay, I don't want the leg meat. So yeah, that's and that can't be overall healthy. I will say this: I do not think that straight grass-fed beef is necessarily healthier or better than corn-fed. I think the practice of how grass-fed beef works is a better, almost you could call it free range in that regard.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Yeah, I actually stumbled across a video from a channel called The Bearded Butchers recently. It's about a half hour long, and they take in a grass-fed and a grain-fed cow, and they go through cutting it up, the differences between it in flavor, the nutritional differences in it. It was a really excellent video, and what I'll do later on is I'll put that link in the description on this video here for our conversation tonight, so people can reference it, because there is a significant difference nutritionally. And I've had people ask me questions along those lines, and not being a bovine expert, I'm really not in a good position to speak on it. I do know that there are differences. I do know that there's a huge difference in flavor, because I've had grass-fed and I've had grain-fed, and I've had grass-fed, grain-finished, and that's pretty similar to the grass-fed. But I don't want to steer us off on a whole grazing topic either. But yeah, there definitely is a difference. There definitely is a nutritional difference. And if you look at like the history of the cow, like where does the cow come from? I think they come from Africa, right? And so they were out on these plains in Africa. They weren't eating like large piles of seeds. So nutritionally for the cow, I think it's better too. But go ahead.
well, yeah, no, you're exactly right. The corn adds more marbling.
Yeah, more fat. It puts way more fat on. That Bearded Butcher video showed that.
Yep, it makes it tastier and maybe not quite as lean. And so, like I say, a nice balance between the two. And again, it comes back to food labels don't just apply to things that come in packages or things that come in. They're not just bags of chips and Fruit Loops or Captain Crunch or whatever you're looking at. Frozen pizza. Meats are one of the great things too. You ought to have a choice there. No, I want grass-fed. No, I want a 50-50 split, or I'm feeling like I want a glass of red wine and a corn-fed beef steak this weekend. And you ought to be able to know those things. And currently, really, the only delineation is, I believe what do they call it? Free-range grass-fed, or it's basically just grass-fed, and that there is no other really terminology. I mean,
and even that I've seen grass-fed messed up. I've had grass-fed steaks that were horrible because I don't think they were doing it right. And one thing I know, I've heard John Kempf talk about the difference in the forage that they're eating. And he was saying that even some of the farms that they've worked with, where they've gone in and done targeted foliar feeds for the forage, they increase the protein and the fat content in that forage. And for like cows that they're milking, you see the fat content go up in the milk from the cow in 24 hours by switching the forage. It goes from 4% to 8%. I mean, there's a massive difference just in the quality of the pasture that you're grazing them on. So, it really is way more complex than that. And that's why I think this food label thing and this tracing from start to finish is so critical and important. We want a food label that reflects what the food actually is, what the container actually has in it, right? Or what the package has in it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I tell you, there's some really good folks that I'm scrolling back up through the comments here, trying not to miss anything. There's some really, Justin Gooder, Kylie Victoria, Drops Family Garden. I tell you what, guys, I really appreciate the feedback, because like I say, this is one of the better channels that I've found. I've gone on a few others, and this audience is very open-minded, and I really, like I say, last week's discussion really blew me away, and I'm happy that we're kind of back to looking at what last week's discussion kind of rolling it over into this week's. I'm happy to be a part of it. But let's just briefly, if it's all right with you, Carlton, let's just briefly touch on CRISPR, because we did last time.
Let's do that.
Let's not spend let's not spend an hour on it, because we sure could. But guys, last time I was very impressed with not only you, CJ, but everybody in the chats. With you guys really had an open mind about it, and really my question simply was, can I put CRISPR in my toolbox as a plant breeder? And a lot of times when you're working with folks that are into the all natural organic movement, they'll immediately throw you out of the room. And I think a lot of it is because I approached you and your channel with a pretty open mind myself. And I'm not arguing for or against. I'm asking you guys a question, and we got some really good feedback on it. And kind of like we were talking, that everybody I've talked to, like 9 out of 10 people are cautious, want to see more data, and
Show me
are a
the
little bit
science kind
leery.
of thing, yeah.
But they understand the incredible medical benefits that are potentially there. So they're not ready to. So they're open-minded enough to say, let's not throw out a technology that essentially could help cure cancer. And kind of the way I look at CRISPR is it's a technology to be applied upon request for each individual's situation. And mainly, let's just look at the medical field just for a brief minute. I mean, if you're sitting in the hospital and you've got terminal issues, I don't think it's any of our right to tell anybody dealing with that they can or can't
Can
use.
have access to it, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, and if you request it, and it's based on each of your own individual experiences and or needs, I think it presents some incredible upside. Now, if this turns into a situation where Wall Street wants to patent everything and just blanket our food supply and our medical fields, and we get to the point where we're just imbibing CRISPR technology with everything we consume, drink, and all of our medicine, I think that would be a gross misuse of a technology this new and unknown. And it really, even in the scientific community and people that are pretty firmly in the GMO camp are pretty freaked out about the idea of the fact that we are playing God with this idea of designer baby. We are literally talking about changing the DNA, the genome of the entire human species. I bet we kind of opened up a can of worms with it. I just kind of asked you a couple of weeks ago, like, have you ever heard of it? And because it is so revolutionary, and it really turned into a wow. I mean, and really kind of what we're trying to do, both Carl and I, is not so much sound the alarm, folks, but okay, right now, the funds and Wall Street and the people with money are in an arms race to patent just as
Every
many
bit of
CRISPR
life
things.
they can, yeah.
Yep, yeah, and some of it's not even usable. Okay, and really, what they're just investing in the idea to get out and ahead of it, so that they can be there to write their own patent laws when the USDA and the FDA come in and grant them approval, and you'll see the same process repeat itself again and again. And so, I think as an independent breeder, do I have confidence in myself that I could do simple, single celiac cell RNA replications and edits, and actually add nutrient density that way, which I've had some amazing, like we talked, just in small little research plots. And I honestly, I wouldn't know where this industry was going, this CRISPR industry was going, had I not kept attached to it and see where it's going and where it's coming from. But I think everybody listening really ought to, this is the time. In the next 3 years, you're going to see CRISPR technology go to the USDA and the FDA And this is the time to voice your concerns, your objections, maybe you're for it. Great, I mean, good for you. Do your own research, but I think really it's up to you. And if anybody ever anywhere, I mean, again, it's one of the reasons that my business is just kind of gangbusters right now, because that's what we do. If you come to me and say, no, I don't want a GMO, I don't grow a GMO, then I say, no, I want organic, well, then I go grow organic. I mean, it's really just that simple. If you come to me and say, Brad, I don't mind the CRISPR. In fact, I've looked at it, and if you can do a simple gene edit, I'll make an order for, a one simple gene edit CRISPR. Okay, maybe in that regard, I think it might be a technology that's, let's not throw it out. But to have just basically a population-wide almost inoculation to these
yeah, like we did with the GMOs and the herbicides and the pesticides. I mean, we had that same problem. Like, I think that's like probably the underlying bigger concern here is people like looking back at what we've done, the negative effects that we've had, and it's like, oh, now here's this new technology, what is that going to look like when we look back in 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Is this going to be a positive or a negative or what, right? Like, it's it's concerning on one level, and on another level it's like, wow, maybe like I haven't shared this video with everyone because I don't know how wide you want it shared or whatever, but like where you were talking about, like, maybe this is the tool that lets us go back and wipe out all the negative effects that we've had, but we just don't know the answer to that yet right now, right? I mean,
correct, and I'm okay with you sharing that video to as many people as care to watch it. I'm not going to post it on my own channel because I got enough of my
totally understand. Yeah,
watch my channel now, but and it's not really that great of a video, but it kind of breaks down just a quick, I guess, layman's terms. I guess what I would say, a simple explanation from a simple guy is maybe the best way to explain that. I just thought that it would maybe be helpful to thread. And there's, YouTube 100 videos about CRISPR. There's better and worse explanations out there. But yeah, it's real. It's coming. I mean, people are asking me, how do we slow this down? Once the momentum picks up, it's going to be in everything, just like what happened with GMOs. And we are at that critical mass point where it is about to come into basically the big money is about to own it, and we've got a 2 to 3 to 5 year period. And we can't fight them in court. We don't have the deep pockets. All we can do is just try to create a better product, a naturally selected breeded product that is fully traceable with a food label that consumers can trust, and trust that is the marketplace that is going to, it doesn't have, when I say win, it doesn't mean, you're going to knock out the other side. Is some people don't give a damn about what they eat. Some people do.
That is so true.
And for those people, okay, fine. Go ahead and go to Walmart and get your produce at Walmart.
Well, I think that like the core of that goes back to the basis of like our Constitution and the whole concept of liberty, personal liberty and freedom, right? The freedom to choose what you want. And if there's people out there who want to make a choice that that I don't agree with, then that's their choice, and it's on them and their responsibility to make the choice that they want to make. And with that freedom and choice comes responsibility, and the responsibility is that you have to accept the repercussions of the choices you make, right?
Right, and that really is in my mind what I mean. Everything comes down to is that I've had many arguments with people that just refuse to come off their positions about GMOs and or non-GMOs. And
Yep.
I say, guys, this is the wrong conversation.
No.
it's
Let's have a
it's not
productive
about
discussion, not a team picker thing, right?
it's not about proving that you think you're right, the other guy's wrong,
Yeah.
or that
It's not about being right.
know.
It's about a productive conversation that takes us all in an evolutionary direction that's forward, right? Like,
Well, and most importantly, that ensures that people have the freedom to choose for themselves.
yeah.
And the best way that they can choose for themselves is to have an actual food label that they can trust. I mean, just from the comments that we saw on the food labels, which, I mean, guys, feel free to keep throwing those in there, because I eat up a feedback like that, because, I mean, I'm developing an independent third-party food label as we speak. I don't know of anybody else in the country doing it
Nope.
because it's
I
so
don't either.
in depth. I mean, I've looked, I've reached out, and people have went, "You're insane. You're never going to get it through the USDA." So I just
Watch
went
me.
around the USDA.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just went right around them, and that's why I asked the
I'll,
question.
I'll
And I mean,
build
you
it
guys
better.
know. I mean, well, it's just, as much as I hate to say it, I mean, they're not around anymore, but they're the big spooky word. I mean, Monsanto. Monsanto owns the USDA. I
Yep.
mean, I'm not being conspiratorial. I'm not going
No.
Illuminati deep on
No.
it.
All you got to do,
Okay.
all you got to do is look at the revolving door between the CEOs and the head of the FDA. This is not like difficult math to do.
Yeah, and so if I walk in the front door of the USDA with this brilliant thing, you know what they're going to do? They're going to rip it off from me,
Yep.
and they're gonna hoodwink the consumers.
Yep.
And next thing you know, you're gonna be thinking, oh, hey, there's Brad's regenerative farmed label. Awesome, let me buy it. And it's not gonna be
Not going to be
it was
what it was meant to be, right? I got a question here from
Exactly.
Drops Family Garden. He says the line between heirloom and GMO is can that product or seed or variant be stable and produce the same result to become an heirloom? So so that's
This
an
is
interesting
a great
question.
conversation. Let's spend just a couple of minutes discussing heirloom seeds, and kind of like you were talking about cattle a little earlier. I'd like to dispel a couple myths about heirloom seeds. Okay, there are some small seeded plants that have nothing but quote heirloom seeds. And then there are other plants that you have to cross pollinate to create a seed, and that's technically a hybrid and not an heirloom. And so some plants need or only can be a quote heirloom seed. A tomato is a good example.
Yeah.
You pull the seeds out of the middle of the tomato. How do you crossbreed a tomato? You really don't.
You actually have to try to crossbreed a tomato. They're so self-fertile and so not accepting of other plants' pollen that you actually have to. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly, and that's the example of a plant where a quote heirloom seed is really your only option. And so people look at that and they go, well, heirloom seeds. It's just got to be all heirloom seeds. Remember, folks, I mean, it's never all one thing or all the other.
Yeah, it's always more complex than that.
It's a balance, and then there's the second side of that, and that is, and I'll arrive at the GMO point here to answer your question, Drops. But the second part of that is then natural selection breeding. Okay, that could be considered. I mean, I've heard people mischaracterize natural selection crossbreeding as heirloom seeds, just because they're not GMOs. So just because it's not necessarily an heirloom seed doesn't mean it's a GMO, and that's a really important distinction to make. I crossbreed a lot of higher nutrient dense organic seed corn that is not technically an heirloom. It's a hybrid that has nothing to do with GMOs, and so that's the distinction.
And the reality is that increases the yield of that crop dramatically, right? You get the hybrid vigor, and that's part of why hybrid corns are so much more productive than heirloom corns. And if you go back and look at some of my corn videos, you'll see the very, very distinct difference between the heirloom corn and the hybrid corns here.
I would say the vigor and the yield is going to be 10 to 15 times. And there's other plants that also, when you hybridize them, they have, the progeny or the second generation is going to yield 10 times more than if you just essentially self-pollinated the plant. It's kind of, I had it explained to me really simply once, and I don't know if this is the best explanation, but when a plant should be crossbred and should have a male and female parent, it's kind of like, they call it an inbred. I mean, and that's what I do, is I crossbreed two inbreds. That way that that's how you naturally select. That way the inbred has 100% of its own traits, and you have to keep those inbreds completely contaminant free. And then you take those inbreds that only yield like 30, 40 bushels to the acre, and you cross them, and then they'll yield to like 70. And then once we've hybridized them the year after that, which would actually be year 3, they'll go out and yield 200 to 300 bushels an acre. Now, if I didn't pull the tassels off and hybridize them, yeah, you're absolutely right. You're looking at a nation of 60 bushel corn, and there's a number of other plants that need to be hybridized that it gives just much better vigor. It's kind of like the idea of, you generally want to reach outside of your own family's gene pool when you think about expanding.
Great example.
And so
you don't want heirloom humans running around. It doesn't look good.
There you go. And there's absolutely nothing, not natural about that. Yes, exactly. And then really the GMO thing, honestly, the simplest explanation there is they're trying to speed up the natural mutation, and it's in that video that Carlton linked that I kind of talk about it. But basically what they're trying to do is speed up the natural mutation of the genetic code of plants. And what they're doing is they're basically radiating seeds to get 1 or 2 characteristics that they're looking for. And then what happens is they change 15 other things that are really bad that they didn't want to or didn't need to change, but they got that 1 or 2 characteristics that they're looking for. And human health be damned. We're a profit machine. We're moving forward. We got the 1 or 2 things we wanted, and we really don't give a damn about the farmer's yield, the viability of the land, anything else. They're all about hitting their quarterly marks to make their shareholders happy. And so that's really, and these large labs are pushing harder and harder and faster and saying, nope, we don't have time to wait for natural selection. We need to push it with mutation breeding. And so get out there and radiate those seeds so that we can speed up what they call the natural process of gene mutation. And that's kind of I don't know if I laid that out as well as I probably could, but you're kind of talking about almost 3 different things there when you ask the heirloom question.
3 very different things, yeah.
Right. So are heirloom seeds good? Yeah, man. Yeah, definitely. Nothing wrong with it. Some plants create really nothing but heirloom seeds.
And hey, let's face it, the heirloom seeds are the basis for all of our hybrids, right? Like without the heirlooms, we wouldn't have a hybrid at all. We wouldn't be able to select the good traits that we want to amplify as we go forward.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, there would all corn was quote unquote heirloom until we started figuring out how to naturally crossbreed it.
Teosani.
In the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly right. But no, that's a great question, and it's one of those things that people think, well, heirloom seeds equal. It's kind of like the organic label. I saw a couple of comments where they put fully 100% organic in quotation marks. Yeah, there's a lot of shysters in the organic industry. Don't kid yourself. There's a lot of stuff being labeled organic that might not be 100% organic. You guys are pretty smart, pretty smart group of people to pick that up, because it's really not that hard to see either. And the same thing with holds true really in all aspects.
Yeah, across the market, there's this obfuscation of terms where they're basically trying to slide their label by the consumer by putting what the consumer thinks is okay, and if they just see that on the label, then they don't look any further, and that's exactly what you're trying to change with this independent third-party, seed to plate tracking, and I think that's great. That's an opportunity for us to really have a choice about what actually is in our food rather than just what the label says. I mean, there's such a huge difference between between a label and the reality of what's in the package.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, just as an example, the other day, as I was actually working on the label, now that I'm back in the lab and where the weather's changed a little bit, I like to go to the store and buy a couple of packages and just read the label, and it tells you saturated fat and sodium and percentage daily and how many grams or milligrams of about 7 ingredients, and then at the bottom it says basically, this contains if it's a bag of potato chips, like a few potatoes, a bunch of corn, and a bunch of corn syrup. I mean, that's basically what it says in there. I mean, so the labels we have today are just, I'm not saying that they're totally worthless, but I don't get much from them in terms of what I'm looking for. I mean, if there ever was a label that I would just knowing what I know, being a farmer, I would pick regenerative farm label every time. I mean, every time, even if it wasn't organic and I was a huge organic person, which I'm not necessarily. I mean, I've grown organic, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, I mean, people that are into organics are food purists, and who doesn't want the purest food you could possibly eat? It's not my place to tell you you're right, wrong, or indifferent. It's my place to grow.
And a point on that too. Some of the studies that they did, they found out 70% of the organic food on the shelf is nutritionally no different than the other stuff. They were trying to push this agenda about it doesn't matter whether it's organic or not, but I think that really speaks to the quality that is involved in organic certification. It goes back to that, you only have the 3-year rule on the pesticides, right? So that's one factor. And then they're not certifying this based on the actual quality of the food. They're not testing the output. All they're doing is putting in, controls that say you can use this, you can't use that, you can use this, you can't use that. And that doesn't do what we're trying to do here with a label that represents exactly what the chain was all the way through, what it was grown in, how it was grown. It's a mislabel is really what it is. They should be called mislabels.
Yeah, how much nutrient
density is in there, and that's critical.
I'm looking back up through the comments a little bit. Drops is dropping some pretty good questions, and there's some other good ones here. If I leave you out, it's not intentional. There's just so many questions rolling in. But he makes the statement, organic label is BS. 30% of the time you're 100% correct.
Nice. Nice stat.
And the other 70% of the time it's probably like 93% organic, but how was it grown? How was it healthier?
Let's face it, from eliminating a chemical standpoint, it's good that it's not being sprayed directly, at least, right? That's a gain overall.
Yeah. You know that. at least you should know that. And there are such things as organic pesticides. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody should know that, but they are completely
Way
different.
less disruptive to the endocrine system. Yeah.
In fact, they're so much less disruptive they really don't work. I mean they,
Right.
you know, if you've got live infestation, they just really they don't work. But he's mentioning here, he says nutritional value of the food is, and this is from Drops Family Garden, a comment here. Nutritional value of the food is what I care most about. What's his idea on industrial farming versus permaculture? That's interesting. Let me read a couple more comments here, and we'll come back to that.
And I'm going to let you read those quick, and I'm just going to hit the bathroom quick because I got to take a quick bathroom break. But carry on.
No, I'll just check your show for about 5 minutes. Don't worry about
Awesome. Awesome. Enjoy.
So, all right, Drops. We'll jump into the industrial farming versus permaculture. And let me just scroll through and see who else's comments are similar, so we can kind of wrap it all up in one. Is it Farm from the Past? He is black and white. What does that mean? YTFP Chris. Let's see. Jobs. Forget organic label. I grow organic, but it would take a decade to get labeled that. Yep, you're correct. Okay. They just plant GMO maize across the road from me for cow feed. Oh my God. Okay, I got that. So sad to hear stuff. Okay, I think I'm caught up with the okay. So we got a couple of comments about monocropping and Drop Family Garden. If you can do me a favor and drop another comment in here. What exactly are you looking for when you're talking about my ideas on industrial farming versus permaculture? Are you talking about monoculture, or are you talking about monoculture versus permaculture? Is that what you're getting at? Drop me a quick comment here to give me a little more to go on. Yeah. And I think I know what I think I know what he's after, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, if you could elaborate on that question, that'd be great.
Okay, it looks like persons like the people here that has me here at Learn Frog. No, these are great. Like I say, I'm kind of just taking a minute to scroll back through that. Some of these comments are not necessarily similar, but kind of without knowing, they're kind of asking the same
along the same lines. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm kind of trying to just take a minute and read through them, and then you can not necessarily tie it up in one neat bow, but it does help to, rather than address them one by one, because they're all kind of asking very similar questions. But I mean, as far as permaculture and monoculture, really the regenerative system is kind of the solution to that monoculture.
Yeah, I mean, permaculture is more of a permaculture is a great concept and a great thing, but it's really hard to implement that for commercial scale food production. And but the regenerative agriculture uses most of the principles from the permaculture concepts. It's just more of a on a productive food system level than it is on a backyard or a more localized market garden system. But those concepts all still apply. It's like you're trying to build soil and build soil health and integrate all the pieces of the ecosystem in a beneficial way to the plants, the animals, and the humans all at once, right? So there is a huge difference. Like I see he says I might be using the wrong term. Industrial farming and livestock uses a lot of chemicals. Yeah, the regenerative agriculture thing is really about building soil, and if you're building soil, chemicals really can't be a huge factor in it, because as soon as you introduce those, you're introducing endocrine disruptors, and they affect all plants, animals, and humans. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just kind of want to.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's what we're here to do, interrupt each other and just try to get to the bottom of some of these questions here. And he makes another statement here. He's been farming or gardening, excuse me, for over 50 years. So he knows a little something about dirt and soil and growing. And so, yes, that's basically okay. No, I think I'm tracking with what he's after now, and you're really absolutely right. Monoculture is like one of the most degrading aspects of modern agriculture.
Yep.
There was a time when a bushel of corn was worth $7. I don't know, like 10 years ago. I mean, we tore up pastures. We were farming on the side of mountains. I mean, guys couldn't plant enough corn because there was just so much money in it. And there were guys that grew corn 4 and 5 and 6 years in a row. And you know what it brought on? It just brought on tons of soil-borne pathogens, diseases,
erosion.
Pests.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. I mean, it's just you just can't make that monoculture work. And so, a kind of it's really not a rotation, but smart farmers are rotating to a legume crop after corn, which basically is a soybean.
Yep.
But when you don't add any cover crops in there, you are basically a monoculture of corn and soy. And I look at it more to Drop's Family Gardens question. We need to get ourselves out of the dietary monoculture that we are in right now. I mean, and that starts, at the production level of agriculture. But really what you're talking about is a dietary monoculture.
Yep.
And we're trying to provide an alternative to that. Not only provide the alternative, but then also the food label that you can trust to know what you're getting. Because how do you compare if you don't know what you're getting?
It's what it is. It's a verified alternative rather than just a labeled alternative, right? I mean, it's the difference between something that they say is an alternative, like the organic labeling problem. We're saying, no, this is an alternative, and we're going to verify all the way back through the food chain that it is in fact what it says it is. It's authentic.
That's pretty good. You might have just came up with. I might have to change the name of the app now to verified.
Verified authentic.
That's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie to you. I like that. But yeah, it's and he's talking composting and manure and get rid of pathogens and we kind of covered that in
episode 11, I think it was.
Yeah, right, and rotational grazing, and okay, so we've kind of laid that out to it's just getting switched over to a wider diversity of crops. Plant some cover crops. That's really when you're looking at the 90 million in crop acres that are just in rows across the entire United States that are basically wheat, corn, soybeans, a little bit of milo. Name 5 other crops off, but those are your 3 staple. Wheat, corn, and soybeans. I mean,
yep.
That's what 80% of the cropland's into. Go out and plant some cover crops, and I mean that was the biggest thing that turned that's how I started adding nutrient density to my naturally selected seed breeding program a decade ago.
Yeah.
It starts with soil.
Yes.
That was nobody could figure out how to get more nutrient density into the seed itself. They're trying with gene mutation, they're trying with gene editing, they're trying with all these different aspects of science. We're trying to inject protein into the seed and see if it just comes down.
At the end of the day, the nutrients got to be in the soil and available and be able to be taken up by the plant. If the plant can't take it up, then you're just injecting it. And is that regenerative or sustainable? No, right?
Correct. I mean, absolutely correct, and that is that is definitely the. I mean, that's the thing that I've. And you talked a little bit about it in the last show, like calcium to magnesium ratios. That needs to be
Important.
7 to 1.
Yeah.
Not
Oh, the nitrogen to
pHs.
sulfur ratio for forming amino acids to
Yeah,
form proteins. Yeah, yeah. That
yeah. I mean,
biochemical sequence of nutrition in plants. If you look at that little chart, man, that is so enlightening about all those pieces that need to be there, and why if you're just missing one, none of the other stuff happens.
right. Yeah, no, and that's exactly right. And really, after 10 years of playing with it, I mean, we found that just through patience and natural breeding and cover cropping and working on putting the nutrients, and not just the nutrients, but the trace nutrients into the soil, then transitioning them into the seed, and then growing essentially heirloom or inbreds of those, and then from there we're hybridizing and or heirlooming, and next thing you know, 5 years later, you've got 10, 12, 15, 17% higher nutrient density from fiber, protein, zinc, manganese, all of the micros and the macronutrients.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, and that's a big part of that is, like you said, it goes back to the soil. It's about biology in the soil, which opens up the soil and pulls those nutrients off of clay colloids and rock particles and all that stuff. And that goes back to plant health. Those two are so intertied, where the soil is the digestive tract of the plant, and the plant is feeding sugars and exudates to the soil microbes. That gives the soil microbes energy to work on, and then that's how they extract the nutrients and make them available to plants. Like, I know I bang on about this a lot, but man, it's important. Those two are they're so tied together. You can't have healthy plants or healthy soils without the other part. They're integral to each other. That's so critical for that, and that's why the cover crops work so well.
Yeah, Marie Vaughn is a very excellent question here. She's
That is a
coming
good
from
question.
a very real world perspective. She must have been listening when I was talking earlier about how it takes a couple years to transition. She says, is it good to rotate? Use chemical fertilizer one season and then use organic fertilizer another. You know what? That is basically what you've described in your question there. That is the transition process. I mean, even
Or
if a farm is deciding to go from conventional to organic, that's the best way to get the highest nutrient density out of it. It's not the quickest way to get to organic certification. I mean, I tell all my guys, go 5 years, and slowly transition your soil rather than a 1 year shock. Yeah, you know what, you kind of do anyway,
you kind of almost
because
have to
we
supplement with the supplemental, like, I hate to say chemical fertilizers, but sometimes you need to supplement a little bit to help get the biology and the plants rolling so they can achieve the health that they need to unlock the soil, right? I mean, that's kind of what it is. Sorry to interrupt again.
Yeah, no, that's right. There's just a bunch of comments coming in. I'm reading, but she really nails the hammer on the head there, or the nail on the head there with that. That's a very good open-minded question, and understanding that changing and fixing this food supply, and transitioning to more nutrient dense production is not going to happen overnight. And so I'm encouraged to see questions like that. And you kind of do, even in conventional farming. Soybeans require different nutrients than corn, for example. If you're a corn and soybean rotation farm, which where I'm from, that's pretty much all there is. I sure would like to see some tomatoes and some other crops being grown around here. We're diving into it and have been for a few years, but we need much more diversity other than just the corn and soy and a few gardens, that's for sure. But Okay, here we go. Neighbor. Okay, Justin Goodearth. As far as regenerative goes, this is Justin Goodearth. As far as regenerative goes, for me, I feel like it is the whole environment. So that would be the opposite of mono-industrial. That's, yep, excellent comment, and couldn't agree with you more. Drops talking about his garden, and he's apparently got a really smart neighbor, so you can't bullshit Drops, that's for sure. Okay, so Marie Bond comes back and says, cool, then I'm doing it V-prop, so I'm guessing that means proper. Yep, they correct properly. Okay, Justin Goodearth again. Cover crops, compost feeds, worms. They feed the soil and water, feed the microbes, the fungi feed plants. You eat plants, waste goes to compost. So he's basically describing the circle of life.
The fertility loop there, yeah.
Yep, nope, that is, I mean, that's almost better than The Lion King did it. That's the, come on, the movie The Lion King. I gotta throw in one or two bad movie references per one. But no, that's a great comment here, and you're absolutely right. And if we could get on a industrial scale, on more of a global or at least a countrywide scale of really looking at our food supply that way. I mean, you guys realize how much food is wasted. That's just look in the
John.
I guess I would
John
suggest looking.
Sorry, John Kempf was just talking about this in one of his recent uploads on YouTube, and he was saying I think the number was 50% of the food produced on this planet is thrown away. I mean, just imagine if we could just not throw away food, like if that could be used by somebody, like when 50% of the food on the planet is being thrown away and there's people starving, like what a disconnect,
Exactly right. Exactly right. I was going to make the statement, look in the dumpster of a high-end restaurant some night.
Oh,
and
my
then
God.
I kind of caught myself and went, probably don't go dumpster diving, but you would be surprised, what's going into the trash can of some high-end restaurants.
I worked for a caterer and also a high-end restaurant back when I was younger, and man, like the stuff that they would throw out that we just take it home because it's gourmet food, it's delicious stuff, but these people will take a couple of nibbles and throw it out. It's like, man, it's just wow. It's really sad to see that when there's people starving.
Right. Oh, you're exactly right. It's one of those,
Yeah.
Can't solve all the world, so you almost want to collapse. But Drop Family Garden has an excellent point that takes me to aquaculture. 50% of seafood is wasted, and that's a great point.
Yeah.
And it leads me to something that, do you know one of the number one things that we're finding with these new soybeans that we're using? You know what fish love to eat?
Soy? Really?
They are getting more nutrient density out of these soybeans, and they are eating them up, and we're harvesting them and looking at way higher and healthier.
That is so awesome. That is so awesome.
Yes, and in fish farms.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've been wanting to add aquaculture to my operation here, like even a small scale thing in the greenhouse. And the one thing I haven't been able to figure out is where do I get a protein source for those fish that I don't have to go buy, something I can grow on the farm and source in the farm and know is of high quality. So that's an answer for me right there.
You know how I learned that? I had some old soybeans that I needed to get rid of, so it was like 50 bushel or something, and they were kind of rotten, so I went and dumped them in my creek bed, figuring, the deer,
something to eat it. Yeah.
They'll eat it. And next thing I know, I'm catching fish out of that part of the pond, and like I can't believe about 3 weeks later, and they're big, healthy. I mean, they were fun to catch, and then they were delicious.
That
And
is
so I
awesome.
did a little research and went, oh wow. And so I would say almost a fourth of the end product soy that we've got out growing right now is going to feed fish farm aquaculture. So just he brings up seafood. That was a great point. And actually, yes, in terms of diversifying our diets, especially where I'm from in the Midwest, not a lot of seafood. I mean, there's
Yeah.
not a lot of great good fish out here. We've been talking for years about putting in a legit fish farm, mainly because the fertility that you can extract from the fish farm and go apply back
And
onto
put back on it. It
you know,
closes that loop up so nicely.
it just does it's and in fact it's almost better than having a chicken farm.
Yeah.
It's damn near the same theory or better, but it's an interesting. I noticed he mentioned seafood, and that's something we had not jumped into yet, was aquaculture. And yeah, if you're looking for a protein source, that really and honestly, you know what? You don't even need to crush them up. And actually, if you leave them set outside and ferment and kind of go rotten they seem like they're going rotten for about 3 weeks. Then put them in the water. The fish, they break down so much quicker, and the fish eat them. If you just dump a freshly harvested soy bean into water, fish are kind of gonna
thumb their gill at it.
Exactly, and then the soybean's going to take on so much water, and you kind of have to use, like many of the comments have talked about, almost kind of the composting theory, if you will. You can, if you set them there, because that's how I learned it. I mean, kind of some beans that I thought were going rotten. Let's go dump them in the creek and bingo.
And that ties right back into the regenerative agriculture conversation we're having here. Like, none of these nutrients are available to plants or humans or even ruminant animals unless the biology is there as the interface. If you don't have the biology, that nutrient can't be transferred. So it's that same thing. It's like fermented foods and sauerkrauts, and they say even nuts and seeds should be fermented. They remove the phytic acid and they make those nutrients more available. And interesting, you notice that correlation just through observation.
Yeah, it's one of those happy accidents that you run into. I mean, it's one of those things that as soon as you get the light bulb turns on and you go, oh yeah, duh, that makes total sense. But all right, I suppose we're getting fairly late here. There's probably no need to drag this thing out for another 4 hours. There are a couple other things that I wouldn't mind addressing if folks are down to do it.
Please
or
do.
We can continue on the regenerative path. They're just a couple of things. These are kind of not necessarily off target, but this is one thing I wanted to just simply address. This thing called, and I heard you guys talk a little bit about it just briefly, the Terminator gene. That's a bit of a myth.
Yeah.
There really is no such thing as a Terminator gene, folks. I just want to throw that out there. What is the purpose of a seed that won't grow? Nobody's ever produced that. GMO
not much of a
seeds
purpose
do not
there.
Right. GMO seeds do not require you spray them with anything. I mean, I've had people argue with me, well, GMOs, you have to spray Roundup on them before they even germinate. Not true.
No, myth.
Not true at all. So, I mean, yeah, exactly. So the Terminator, I think it's just a terminology thing where it's intellectual property laws, and it comes back to this. You meant Percy Schmeiser.
Yep.
That's a very interesting story. And
yes,
if you
it is.
don't mind me taking a couple.
Oh, please do.
I will. kind of just address what exactly went on there. Uh, I'm fairly familiar with the story, and this happened in what, the late '90s, I believe,
Think so, yeah, late 90s.
early 2000s.
Maybe early
I think,
2K.
yeah, yeah. Doesn't he have a movie, or isn't there a
Yeah, there's
movie
a
about it
whole
or something coming out?
hour and 15-minute documentary, something like that. And there may be something new coming out, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's an old documentary on it.
People tell me I need to watch it because it's just
You
such a
should.
steaming pile of. I mean, but I see both sides of it. But this is what actually happened with Percy. Okay, and there really was an evil intent on either side. It was a huge misunderstanding, and then both sides backed into their corner and did the you screaming at each other. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, you're right. No, I'm wrong. Okay.
And then nothing
So
productive happens.
here, here's the deal. Percy Schmeiser's growing canola in, I believe, Western Canada.
Yep,
And
Manitoba, I
canola
think.
is a crop. Yeah, okay, yep. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but he's growing canola. And he's growing non-GMO canola, and across the road there's Roundup Ready canola.
Yep.
And it was some of the first Roundup Ready canola.
Yep.
And it drifted into his field. So what he did is he went out, or should I say, the canola pollen drifted into his field and made some of his non-GMO canola Roundup Ready. What he then did is went out and sprayed Roundup on his field, and I noticed that only about 60% of the plants died. So that means that the remaining 40% that did not die had the Roundup Ready gene in them. He then went to harvest them for seed to sell them, and his position was, no, they're my seeds. It's not my fault that you're stupid.
Not my fault. It's not my
stuff.
fault your stuff contaminated mine. Yeah.
Right, and Monsanto came back and said, no, wait a minute, we're going to sue you for the illegal use of patented seed and replant laws.
Yep.
And that was it was a landmark case because it essentially set the precedence. And I can see both sides, and I can totally see the people that are, anti-Monsanto and anti-GMO jumping on that story and going, oh my God, they're suing a poor little farm, and they did. I mean, it is a screwed up story.
And they definitely went above and beyond suing him, and they stalked him and his family. They went to a level that was far beyond what was necessary, for sure. But I get your point too. Like, trying to preserve your seed genetics. Well, I mean, why are you breeding seed? Like, you want to, you want to be able to sell your seed, right? I'm sorry, I interrupted you again. So go ahead.
That's absolutely fine. But no, it was the late '90s. Roundup was still relatively new, and they were going to prove a damn point.
Yeah.
I mean, they went way too far. They gave the other side so much ammo, so much so to the point that really the story that I just told you is never really told. It's that it drifted in and they sued him because now that, in fact, most lawsuits that I've seen in that regard go the other way. If I'm growing a non-GMO crop and somebody's GMOs would come in and contaminate mine, the lawsuit's going to go the other way. I'm the one that had the loss.
I'm glad to hear that because I was under that impression that basically if they contaminated your I'm glad we're having this discussion because even I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and Monsanto and Bayer and Dow and DuPont and all these have settled, like, I don't know, probably $1.5 billion worth of contamination lawsuits to this. They just settle them out of court because they're multi-freaking-billion-dollar companies.
It's cheaper to settle most of the time anyway, right?
Exactly. And so I would say 97% of those contamination cases that actually make it to court go the other direction. But this one, they went too far. But also what Percy did that was... the laws were a little vaguer then, but it was a big thing. You cannot replant Roundup Ready seed. You cannot replant Roundup Ready seed because for a soybean, you get about 10, 15, 17 good seasons out of it. You can just harvest a soybean, condition it, and plant it the next year. It's a great example of a legume crop that is essentially, I don't call it the heirloom process, but for simplicity's sake of what we've kind of discussed.
Yeah, it's not tonight, because it's actually transgenically modified. That's totally different than selective breeding.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly right. But you can take a soybean and just harvest it that way, and then turn around and plant it. And so farmers for years would put soybeans in their bin and then just pull some soybeans out next spring and go plant them. I mean, and this was before Roundup and any of these intellectual property laws. And but what Percy did that was really his undoing, and the reason he lost the case, is that he went out and he sprayed Roundup on it knowingly, and then he took the plants that didn't die, and he knew that they were Roundup resistant, and then he went to condition them and sell them as Roundup ready seed without having to pay the royalties. And it just set off a whole chain of events, which basically he was selling Monsanto's intellectual property.
Yep.
Without paying the royalty, and whether we agree with it or not, it was illegal as hell. I mean, he knew exactly what he was doing. And did Monsanto go too far when they went after him? Oh, you're goddamn
for
right.
Sure they did.
They went too far because he knew exactly what he was doing too. So that's just one thing that I wanted to, I know somebody mentioned that there was a documentary out about him that I needed to watch, and I just wanted to kind of
touch on it. Yeah.
Just touch on it and say, 97% of these drift cases go the other way, and they settle. I mean, when you hear about it's really less of an issue. There really aren't big seed companies suing little old farmers because their stuff drifted into our fields. It's little old farmers that are getting their non-GMO drifted onto that can go back to the big seed companies for recourse, and 9 times out of 10 they settle with you. And that's really, if you dig into the legal battles surrounding that, that's more of the norm than Percy's story. But that being said, I mean, tell the story, because I mean it is a good example of what happens when there's misunderstandings on both sides.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you guys hit on, and this is something that I'm really interested about, gluten sensitivity and food allergies. I guess I had no idea. You guys really jumped into it, and you probably know more about this than I do, Carlton. But what is the refresh me? It's like non-diagnosed gluten sensitivity, leaky gut syndrome, something to that. Kind of refresh.
They all sort of run along the same lines. There's gluten sensitivity, and there's actually now I can't think of the term, celiac disease. And so like diagnosed celiac disease, like Bomber that was in the chat here last episode 11 when you were on, was talking about her celiac allergies and how sensitive she is, so much so that like even a little bit of gluten on like a plastic container, if she reuses it, will actually set off her allergies and put her in a really bad place. But there's all different levels of that, and I know my mom actually has developed allergies to wheat and some of these other crops. I think I think this is another discussion that at some point we should unpack, because I think it's not just gluten. I think it's the strain of wheat. Most of the wheat that's produced now is not Durham wheat. It's this high productivity wheat once again, and it's about weight. It's not about nutrient or trace mineral nutrition, and it's higher in gluten from my understanding. And actually John Kempf did a video, or it was on AEA's channel. It was actually John, Advancing Eco Agriculture's David Miller talked about different wheat crops. And for those who are interested in that whole gluten and wheat thing, that is an excellent video that goes into the depths of that a little bit more, and it also touches on some of the wheat breeding stuff. So I don't know, does that help fill anything in for you, or have I just babbled?
Yeah, absolutely. And anybody that wants to comment on food allergies as we move forward into the next evolution of the food supply is something that is on the top of my mind, and that's why I really enjoy this community and discussion so much. That I learn. It seems like I always learn something every time I talk with you and read through the comments. I don't want to say unaware, but I read some comments, and I think you kind of read them out loud last week about, I mean, extreme sensitivities.
Yeah.
And then undiagnosed food allergies. And I have a daughter who was born with a little bit of a peanut allergy. And the first time we gave her peanut butter when she was old enough, I mean, she almost, seized up and had to EpiPen her to get her breathing again.
Wow.
And our doctor said the best thing to do is to just kind of slowly inoculate her to peanut butter, and
yes.
just a little at a time. And now she's not allergic to, and instead of taking, these kids and be like, oh my God, they're allergic to a nut. Don't ever,
and then not expose them to it anymore, and then they can't develop any kind of tolerance to it. Yeah, it's the same thing we see with plants, right? Like, you want a plant to be resistant to things, you have to expose it to that. It's that epigenetic effect where, any gene is expressed in an environment, and that environment, basically is a feedback loop to how the genetics are being replicated. So you gotta be exposed to it to be able to tolerate it.
It kind of brings the conversation full circle. I called it kind of inoculating her to, but it's using the natural process of life, if you will. I mean, you can't get more regenerative than that. Rather than trying to gene edit our way out of that food allergy, you just kind of work through inoculating. Now, the side that I don't want to say I was completely unaware of, but extreme food allergies, where people, break out in hives and their airwaves seal up because of, I mean, what are they adding now into certain types of bread? Is it whey? I forget what. There's an ingredient they're putting in bread now that's really screwing people up now too.
Man, I don't.
Had a number of people mention that to me. That bread is there's an additive in bread that's been there for 20 years that doesn't really need to be there, and I think it's something to do with either appearance and or shelf life.
I think it's shelf life they're after, yeah. And I know Marie Bond, I'll have to, I'm not sure how I can share those pictures, but I'll have to share those pictures. She took some snapshots. She's in South Africa, and she took snapshots of some of the bread, the labels on the bread that she gets there, and some of the ingredients are, I don't know, I wouldn't want to be eating that.
Right. And so food allergies is kind of I guess the next frontier. And as we, if we get to the right balance of nutrient density, and if you've got a food allergy, you have to have a food label that you can trust. I mean, you look at a lot of Chinese restaurants that use, almonds or cashews or things like that, and people go in and order a Chinese meal, not knowing that they make a certain kind of nut, and next thing you know that we've got issues. And so that's something that I guess adds on to the need for a legitimate and accurate, traceable audit trail. I mean, has this food ever been touched a container that for example, the gluten issue, I mean, mentioned can't even deal with stuff that has been a bin that has had wheat with gluten in it, and in my world, say I've got a bin with 3,000 bushels of gluten-filled wheat in it. I empty that bin out, and then I put gluten-free wheat in it. Well, there's going to be some, it's not necessarily packaging, but it's storage. That needs to be traceable and clean, and there needs to be a identity preserved system in place for basically gluten-free and or a number of these other food allergies that we have, because there's some of them that are deadly. I mean, very, very,
Yeah.
very deadly, and need to be taken extremely seriously. I don't think we can inoculate everybody's food allergies away.
No, but
that,
I just want to say I think this food allergy thing is indicative of our mistakes here with the chemicals and some of these transgenic crops. I think those are a big part of what's affecting the human genome. On an epigenetic level, they're consuming these foods, and it's changing. It's literally changing pathways in our system that how our DNA replicates. Something as simple like, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Are you familiar with her at all?
Yep.
Okay. And
yeah, yeah.
And one of her videos, she talks about sulforaphane and how that affects the NRF2 pathway and how that turns on good genes and turns off bad genes. I think a lot of this disease stuff can be addressed through regenerative agriculture and trace mineral nutrition and, really actually healthy plants. I think we can, over time, go the other way. But I agree that, these sort of hazards really need to be addressed. And like you say, like one person eats, even the slightest little fraction of a peanut, it could kill them. This is something you really need to have trust in your food labels, and we don't have it. There were a couple of questions there from Robert Hayes. I don't know if you saw those on the way by.
I had to step away from the comment on my computer for a minute. I'm just sitting back down and starting to go through them, but lay them on me if you've got a handle on them.
Well, let me roll back to them here. I was actually stepping away from the console myself. Let's see.
Here I can. I'm back at it. Let me look here.
Okay.
You say from Robert Hayes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Percy
It's not gluten. It's gluten foods. I'm looking at Marie Bond here. I'm just working my way down. This is just interesting to me. She says it's not the gluten. It is the way gluten foods are being manipulated that is having an effect. I would agree. I think that you laid that out pretty much exactly right on. Okay, Robert Hayes. And I don't know, I think I've got, let me scroll up and make sure. I think
this one's on Percy Schmeiser, I think is the first one from him.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Had a speaking tour way back and visited Philly and spoke at a meeting house here. Did the seed company expect to get a licensing fee from people who harvest and clean their own seed? Yes. I grow and harvest and clean my own seed, and if it is, even if it's non-GMO, a lot of times I have to pay for the germplasm. Now I have a number of my own lines that are my own germplasm that I don't have to pay for, but I'm a rare instance. 90, like no other farmers in the world have
99.99%. Yeah.
Right. And so even if you wanted to grow your own non-GMO seeds, you'd have to and replant them, perfectly legal, okay, but all you would have to do is pay for the licensing to use the genetics, because somebody owns those genetics. Somebody owns
it's like licensing software in the technology world.
Exactly. And so yes, and that he pretty much asked the question and answers it there. That's a very good observation by Robert Hayes there. And Percy, he kind of got, I think there was a movement that kind of used his story a little more and pushed it just further and further one direction, and then I think that pushed the seed company further and further the other direction, and it just went as far downhill as downhill could go. I'm not suggesting that Percy deserved any of that.
No, no.
Not at all. I'm just simply trying to lay. These are the facts, and these are the laws, and this is how this is. But yes,
trying to clean up the facts of the discussion so we can have a productive discussion, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then let's see here, scrolling on down and see what else we got. Okay, and Drops Family Garden. I collected seeds this year. Good for you. If they're coming out of your garden and you bought them at a garden center, nobody owns the genome, you're perfectly fine, and no major seed company is going to come check your garden. If you go to commercialize it and sell it, you might want to check into the laws of your locality, state, and seed licensing.
That whole thing is complex, isn't it?
It's so complex we could do a whole show just on it. Yeah, I mean it really is.
Maybe we could do that over the winter. I'd love to just kind of go into some of how that all works. Like we don't have to go into like super specific, but I'd love to go into how that system works and how you go about licensing a seed and that kind of thing. I'm curious about that myself.
Well, and I can give you a pretty quick, like less than a minute, just kind of summary to give you some food for thought. But if it's a non-GMO, what you have to do is you have to pay to license the genetics to use it up front, and then that's it. And that's usually like $3 to $5 a unit on soybeans and $10 to $12 a unit on corn. Just giving you a rough guess here, okay? And then if it has a GMO in it or a trait in it, upon retail, you have to pay a percentage of what you sold it for retail back to the seed company who owns the basically the GMO trait. And so that's what makes GMOs so much more expensive, and that's why the conventional crops, even though we're paying for the licensing fees to use the germplasm up front, that's a small fee. What we call it at retail, the royalties are like $60 a bag. $50 a bag. The royalty fees for the new Monsanto Bayer dicamba soybeans are like $31 a unit.
Wow.
I mean that.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's so. Yeah. I mean, and when I'm growing non-GMO seeds, I don't have to, or selling non-GMO seeds, I don't have to pay that royalty at all. It's the cost of the soybeans, and especially if I'm using my own germplasm, I don't have that cost. So it's the cost of the soybeans and the cost of running it through my mill and then replanting it. I mean, it's literally about $4 more than you can buy the soybean for.
Wow.
And if you're buying germplasm from somebody else, okay, it might be $8 more. Because most people don't have access to their own germplasm. But then when you go to the retail side, that's where they get really picky, and that's where Percy got in trouble. Is that he realized what he was doing, and he stopped, and he didn't even. That's where Monsanto went way too far. He went, okay, fine, you win. I'm not going to try to retail them, but they just kept coming after him. Even I remember that story. It was like, dudes, chill out.
Right.
Okay,
Enough already. You made the point. Like you already beat him down. You don't have to kick him in the head while he's laying on the ground. Like.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so it does kind of relate back to the Percy story of how that whole system works. And yeah, it's extremely complex, and you can license genetics through many different companies, and the figuring out which lines to cross. And I mean that's all the little goody of the plant breeding, all the the education of years and years of breeding plants. Uh-oh.
For
Did I
sure.
lose you?
No, I'm here. I'm just,
Oh,
I'm not interrupting you for once.
no.
We have a
I think
question here from Justin Goodearth.
yeah.
Says, Brad, Paul Stamets talks about the lack of bees and pollinators in the Midwest due to polyculture and industrial farming. Do you see the massive impact in your experience in the area?
Um, that's an excellent question. There's been so many studies done. Okay, our planters that we use some years back went to using talc because they were air system planters. They were vacuum planters, and what would happen is they would build up static electricity and explode. And they literally killed a few farmers in the
Wow.
early 90s. I shouldn't laugh at that. So what did we do? We simply put some talcum powder in there, and you coat the seed with a little bit of talcum powder, and all of a sudden it flowed through the air planter so much easier. And one of the biggest things that we found out, guess who really doesn't like that talcum powder? Bees.
Honeybees.
They really, for whatever reason, and you could probably explain this better than I could, they really don't like that talcum, and so to the point that literally the laws changed 7 or 8 years ago that we now have to use a pollinator-friendly talcum powder, and in fact, planter technology changed to the point to get away from having to use talcum powder. Now, is that the sole cause? Absolutely not. There's way more there than
For
just
sure. That's
that.
the bee thing is always a complex topic.
One example, but this is kind of an interesting thing that if you're growing a non-GMO pesticides, I mean that's really
That's
you
the
wanna know
bigger
what killed the
issue.
bee?
Yeah.
Pesticides. And that was the great hope of GMOs, like I laid out in the video. GMOs came along because we were trying to reduce the use of pesticides and
And it went the other
engineer into
way.
the plant
Yep.
so that it would technically only target harmful insects, right, and not beneficial insects. That was the theory. And okay, nice theory, but it also comes with some drawback. But it's just an overuse of pesticides. I do very little spraying of pesticides even on my seed crop, my conventionally grown seed crops. I've got to see a really massive infestation before I'm going to go kill a bunch of ladybugs and get rid of essentially the natural
Yeah.
most ecosystem. But especially when you have cover crop, I mean, you're killing all of the beneficials, and I mean, there better be an infestation so large that I'm almost going to lose my crop before I'm going to consider spraying pesticides. And basically, for the last 20 years, university data has crop scouts telling farmers, hey, you're going to gain 3 to 5 bushels a year if you just spray pesticides every year on your crops, because that just keeps all those bugs out of there, makes sure there's no feeding whatsoever, and just another piece that couldn't be of information that couldn't be more backwards and more wrong. If you want to really break it down, pesticides have not. We're low on ladybugs. I mean, ladybugs are one of the most beneficial insects, also to exist in a field
Fact.
anywhere.
Yep.
And we're low on them as well. I mean, so it's just same old overuse of pesticides, definitely. And there's drops again. He's bringing up, there are natural ways to keep insects away, and there are some organic based pesticides that are
like neem oil that's more systemic. It's like neem oil, you can't just put neem oil on and expect it to kill pests right away. The neem oil interrupts the pest reproductive cycle, so you have to be proactively doing this in the beginning of the season in advance, so that you disrupt that cycle before they can reproduce. And a lot of those organic pesticides work in a similar fashion, from my understanding.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You basically just need to put the natural the natural
system in place.
whatever you want.
Yeah.
And you just need to do it.
Yeah.
Whether
and that this goes right back to our conversation about like that transition takes time, right?
Yes, exactly, exactly right. And that's the, and that's really the big point is that, I've been seeing, I've been on the, I guess you'd say, the cutting edge of this transition for a good decade now. And I mean, there's a lot of guys that are transitioning to regenerative farming that don't give a crap about green carbon sequestration. They're not they don't even look at it that way. They're saying I'm making more money doing this. So it is an inevitability. But one of the problems is that everybody's so invested in the equipment that they have right now. I mean, just as an example, for my operation's a little different, but I bet you I have $75 million worth of assets and equipment. An average 2,000 acre farm is going to have $2 million in assets worth of equipment. And they're already strung out on a thin line with,
with loans outstanding they got to pay, and overhead,
and you're gonna walk into their shop while they're under this amount of stress, damn near ready to lose their farm, and tell them, you know what, I need you to go buy $300,000 or $500,000 of completely different equipment to transition farming process. I mean, some of them might just punch me right in the face.
Yeah, if they don't laugh you out, they're probably going to punch you out.
Exactly, and so it's one. And so when actually a few years ago, there's a couple brothers in Kansas that transitioned to regenerative, and the older brother was like, "I don't care anything about, environmentalist hippie about it." I mean, he went out of his way to run down the green side of regenerative farming, to the point that it kind of made me chuckle, but it also was very enlightening to me, because he said, I'm just simply doing this because I make more money and I don't have to work as hard and I don't have to borrow as much money and I don't have to spend as much money. And actually, on a 3-year average, not only am I making more money, but my soil's not running off. I don't have to do as much dirt work, and I can just go plant right into whatever the heck's out there. It doesn't bother me at all, and I don't need to go for the massive yields anymore because I have, and so that was kind of another aha moment. It depends on each operation and each operator and what their thoughts are on. Some guys really approach it from an eco standpoint,
Depends on your perspectives. Yeah.
They're just trying to save their family farms and literally are to their last,
and not lose their ass.
Yeah, that are just on their last rope, and they're like, I can't borrow the money to continue. The bank won't loan me the money, Brad, to continue to chemical farm. How are you doing this? How do I transition to where I can plant my crop for 1/3 of the cost? And I'm going to get a few less bushels maybe in the first few years, but I mean, how do I do it?
And at that point, they're in a desperate position too. And with that 2 to 3 year transitional time, boy, they're really in a tight spot, right?
That's why I mentioned earlier, have a little patience with those operations as consumers, guys. Because if we go at them and hammer them, and be like, nope, you must switch everything the first year or you're nothing, and it's like, no, it's like everything in life and agriculture. It's never all one way or all the other. It's about the transition.
Yeah, and things take time. Nature takes time, and you can't expect to take a shortcut, and not, like, there's no easy shortcut, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There really isn't. And everybody that I've worked with in the transition process, even the skeptics, year 1, bang, results. Year 2, holy crap.
Sold. Year 2, sold.
Year 3, their whole farm is going that direction. year 4, they are laughing at how much they didn't know, and oh my God, what have I done to my soil for the last 40? I mean, what once it really kicks in, they come back and go, wow, I said, hey, I did it too when I was in my 20s. I thought I was a chemistry genius.
Yep.
I was one of the top chemical farmers in the country, man, cranking out yields like you couldn't believe. I putting acidized insecticide in my seed furrow because I was monoculture and seed corn because I was making so much money doing it, and then putting on so much pesticides and herbicides, and I different noxious mixes of there's not a weed on this planet I can't kill with about. I was raised in this chemical farming environment, and at a certain point I looked back and went, dear God,
What the hell am I doing?
what did I what literally I thought I was so smart, and really what I did was, if it wasn't for my biological systems that I was running, kind of side by side with my chemistry systems, what I came to learn is that my biology was able to eat some of that toxic chemistry.
Yep.
It didn't help anything, but if I was not putting on, foliar and biological supplements like humates, trichoderms, and things like that, I'd have been in,
really
much,
big
much
trouble.
bigger.
Yeah, from a
Right,
standpoint.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's funny,
And
John.
so it's just things.
Sorry. It's funny, John Kempf. John Kempf grew up with his family's farm was the biggest pesticide and chemical fertilizer sales for his whole area in Ohio. And I just find it interesting that, and me too. Like when I started out farming, like I started out gardening with my parents, but when I worked for a farmer, we were using, pesticides and chemicals and chemical fertilizers. That was the model we were using, and I really believed in that model. And and I remember spraying Roundup around my garden, and my mom coming over and going, "What are you spraying? What is this chemical you're spraying?" I was like, "Oh, it's benign. It doesn't do anything." Blah blah blah. And now I look back years later, and I'm like, "Man, what was I doing?" It's funny how we all seem to come from that place, and then as we evolve we look back and we go, wow, man, was I banging my head against a brick wall.
Yeah, well, education is a scary thing, man. That's basically what we're talking about. It's from CRISPR to food labels, independent party, third party verified food labels, and everything's coming around full circle here. You're looking at human health deteriorating. You've got coronavirus just taking over across the globe, apparently spiking again.
The alarm bells are just ringing, aren't they?
They're ringing so loud that and it's kind of funny to me. In the last 3 years, you can't open up an ag website or a magazine. But believe it or not, at my office, we still get magazines sent to us. They do still exist. They pile up on the front desk, and somebody eventually throws them away. But there's all these articles in there about this new regenerative farming movement, and I kind of chuckle and go, there ain't nothing new about regenerative farming.
It was actually the system that existed before we went to chemicals, right?
Right. And they're treating it like it's this great new thing that we've just discovered, and it's like no.
Yeah.
It's going back to before we started dumping all these chemicals on the soils, and there is that transition process. I even found it myself. I've still got some of my own ground that I try to do a 3 to 5 year transition where I wean the soil off of basically chemistry and herbicides, and fertilizers are the big one. Once you get your cover crop established, you can generally get away without having to use herbicides, especially with this Austrian winter pea I've been playing with. It just covers the ground so well.
I'm loving that, by the way.
Yeah, how are you liking that? And wait, give it a couple of months into the freezing winter, and that's going to surprise the heck out of you. You're going to go out there in a 30-degree day in January and February, and you're going to go, "How is this stuff green?" And
Uh,
yeah, there's going to be some fried tissue from freezes. Yeah, oh yeah, but it doesn't kill it. It comes straight back. Yeah, mine's just starting to emerge. Mine probably went in a couple weeks later than yours, and I don't know if you saw that video I made the other day. Mine just starting to
yeah,
come out and
just
emerge,
popping. Yeah.
and yeah, yeah, and it's yeah, that's gonna be one of the best. And what I did is I left a 12-inch wide lane to plant down next year. So I hope I don't even have to roll them. My hope is that I can
Plant
just
right between
plant
them and
into.
let them keep fixing.
Yep, yep. And what I found is that the Austrian winter pea gives up about July. It gave up about July 30th for me this year, and just laid down on the soil, and it was just a soil mat and soil armor, and I had less weeds in that field than some fields that I went and sprayed with herbicides 3 times. I mean, we've got so many resistant weed issues that coming out of and they're not just Roundup resistant anymore. I mean, the Palmer amaranth weed is an interesting one.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
There's like Yeah, well, there's like what, 42,000 species of it, and they just crossbreed with each other. One Palmer amaranth plant can put out something like 1 million seeds,
Yep.
and they crossbreed with each other. And so every year you go out and you half kill a few of them. They put out their seedlings, and then they grow next year. And because they crossbred, they have so much vigor
Yeah.
that now they're like 100% resistant to anything and everything.
Oh
It's a real
man.
problem.
I don't
Palmer,
use any herbicides on mine here, but when I have them come up, boy, they are aggressive, really fast growing, and like the only way I found I could beat them is like I'll plant the corn out, and well, up until now, at least so far, I've been tilling, plant the corn, and let the corn come up, and then go back through with the tiller and till again, and then plant buckwheat in. And if I get the buckwheat planted right and I get it to pop just right, it'll beat the amaranth. But if I miss it by even a day or two, boy, the amaranth is back in there, and I got to go back in and hand weed. What a pain those things are. I'm hoping to cure some of
oh,
that with the rye cover cropping this year.
they'll grow 4 or 5 inches a day if you're acquiring enough heat units. It's amazing. The
Yeah.
only plant I found, why I got into this Austrian winter pea so much, the only plant that I've ever found that will drown out a Palmer amaranth is the Austrian winter pea. I did about, for the last 3 years ago, I did a 5 acre trial where I just let Palmer amaranth grow, and because I wanted to see, and then I planted Austrian winter peas, and there's something in the roots about the way that those Austrian winter pea roots grow, and you'll see it next spring. They grow vertically and horizontally. And literally, the Palmer amaranth, once the pea's established, the Palmer amaranth quit growing, and it looked like it had been sprayed. But it literally, the Austrian winter pea was choking the roots out. And that was when I went, yep, okay, we need to just start blanketing this farm with some Austrian winter peas
I'll
and
bet.
see how this.
I'll bet there's an exudate that the Austrian winter pea is putting out that the amaranth doesn't like. I'll bet there's some kind of an exudate chemical action between the two of them that's suppressing the amaranth, kind of like the rye has that allelopathic effect on so many things.
Yep, yep, and I'm very much in that camp also. I've studied a little bit on these Austrian winter peas for 3 years, and I mean, they're kind of an unknown quantity. That they're not necessarily new, but they're newish. I mean, guys aren't really. You got to be careful with them. In a lot of ways, they're like a little bit like a Palmer amaranth. They will overtake your cash crop. I mean, that's the timing has to be right. That's why I left lanes to plant into. I mean, they'll bush up to be 3 feet tall,
Wow.
before they up. Yeah, I mean they really will. If you may find, oh crap, it's a problem, and I need to go in and strip out some areas. But I think you'll find even if you have the area that you plant them in, even if you have, let's just say, I mean, the first couple of years I played with them, I basically had crop failures, and because I just was learning, the cash crop got, it's like, okay, well, that was a stupid idea, I guess. So let me go disc that down now. That's another bad idea, but got to get rid of it somehow. So I take the disc out there, start turning the dirt over, and it's a little too wet, and I can't hardly believe it. I get out and I start looking around, and I go, this is different soil than what it was just this spring. The Austrian winter pea and the root system literally changed my soil. And I start turning it over and looking and going, look at how porous this soil is.
I tell you, I'm seeing that even just with buckwheat. I can't wait to see what the Austrian winter pea does. And there's a question here from Robert Hayes. He's wondering how Austrian winter peas get harvested for seeds next time, especially if they lay down by June.
Austrian winter peas grown for seed get planted in the spring, and they get harvested, depending on factors, August, mid to late. You'll probably want to plant them June 1st, last week of May, and you're going to want to plant them into an extremely clean field, because there's not a lot of herbicide options if you need to clean them up, and you really can't, cultivation. I use it, you really don't want to plant them in strips, and use cultivation. So I found, go out, use tillage, and then put the Austrian winter peas in, and they will just take off and take over. And then when you plant them and they don't overwinter, they head out much more quickly and put on a ton of seeds, and you just run a combine through there, just basically just like you're harvesting wheat. And so if you're growing it for seed, you plant it at a little bit different, basically different times of year. And almost all cover crops are that way. When I'm growing them for seed, I plant them in the spring. When I'm growing them for cover crop and soil health, I
plant them in the fall or late summer.
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. It's awesome. I've just seen even the rye and stuff has really greened up since I put rye and Austrian winter pea in together this fall here as a way to put my beds to bed for the winter. And I go out there and I look now, and already I see the difference in the bed, like everything growing in that bed, and within 3-4 feet of the edge of the bed where the grass comes up to the edge of the bed, it's all this deep dark green. It's like 14 shades darker than everything else. It's amazing how effective they are. And these plants aren't all that tall, and then the deer have been in here every night grazing the crap out of the rye and the Austrian winter pea, and they're just, man, they're tough little plants. I'm really stoked to see what that looks like in February. Like, I know your one video was from February 10th last year, where you showed those, and it had been really cold out, and there they were, like you said, some tissue burned back from the cold, but still green. That's exciting to be able to see green growing plants in the winter.
And I think you'll find that there's going to be more of a nitrogen credit, and it probably double a nitrogen credit than anything you've ever seen before with any other legume cover crop. At least that's been my experience. All different reactions in all different areas. Who knows how they'll react in your area. But from what I've seen, I think I put on 17 or was it 22 pounds an acre of them. Forget what it was, and my soil core tests were telling me that they gave me well over 130 pounds of actual available nitrogen for the corn crop that I grew this year into them. And I didn't have to spray any herbicides. And if you can get that corn up before those Austrian winter peas take off, I don't know if I need to plant, or I'm throwing that around in my head. You know, you don't want to plant too early, but I mean, the Austrian winter peel damn near take over anything. That's how effective it is. We've kind of been joking around here. Maybe in a few years we're going to be trying to control
Yeah,
resistant
yeah,
winter pea.
the invasive Austrian winter pea.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Well, I have to say, I think I'd rather have an invasive crop or a crop that's hard to manage, that's a legume, than fixing nitrogen, than just some of these invasive species, or what they're labeled as invasive species that isn't providing so much benefit to the soil. I think I'd rather see the benefit and find a way to manage that. Even if it comes back to, like, if I have to go back in there and do a mow and cut, and then follow that up with some intense tillage, even if I got to till it and then come back in a week and till it again, like, just to add all that nitrogen for free. What an awesome benefit. And I want to get some radishes in the mix for next year, and give that nitrogen somewhere to be sequestered over the winter. I think that'll make a even better difference, and also help open that tight clay soil up.
Justin Gooder, it sounds like he's got to get up and trade limit up markets tomorrow.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm probably going to do the same,
Yep.
because the markets are moving big pieces. Where can we get your genetics, Brad, or how can we support? I tell you what, I will give CJ the info and the links, and that'll send you basically right through to my website, and then it's a matter of exactly what you're looking for. And I've got one or two or three or four different customers that own genetics, and I've got my own line of genetics, and it's a matter of what you're after, what characteristics you're looking for, and what you're trying to accomplish. And we'll figure out the details. It's tough to answer that question in a one-off, just because of all of the intricacies of ag. But yeah, definitely, we'll get you a way to get in touch with me, and we'll get you fixed up if you're really looking for whatever you're looking for. We can dive in and have that conversation, definitely. And in fact, you would be surprised how many people that I've met across YouTube, and I don't do any other social media, that I've actually made quite a few sales.
Awesome.
Things like this.
Awesome.
Where it's like like for the Justin Gooder guy. It's like, what I do. I'm not gonna try to make a dime off of them. Just here, try these genetics and see how you like them. And you know what? If they're good, you're gonna come back for more.
I was gonna say, you'll be back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I always do with first-time customers. It's like, this is what it cost me, and this is what it cost me to ship. I maybe even free ship them to you. I'll eat the shipping, and unless you want a truckload of them, then maybe let's split the shipping. But most of the times it's like, hey, send me 30 pounds, send me 50 pounds, send me 100 pounds, send me 20, whatever. And so much of it's just freaking paperwork and nonsense that it is impossible to give away free seed anymore. You know that? I mean, I can't even give away free seed.
Really?
I can turn around. Yeah. Because of I can give away my seed for free, but my genetic licensing companies that I still have to license genetics. I don't have to pay for them, but they're still licensed.
Yeah.
They'll come to me and say, no, you didn't keep track of that correctly. Where's the licensing fee? It's like, well, I'm paying it to myself.
Right.
I actually got big trouble for giving seed away a few years ago. And I'm like, I own the seed.
But I own it. What are you talking about?
So literally what I'll do is I'll write the guy a check, and then he'll write a check back to me. And so it looks like he paid the licensing fee to either Lauber Seed Farms
to play the paper game, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's literally how I mean, you're mentioning about jumping into the way that the seed licensing and retail royalties work. Oh man, it's a yeah,
It's
we could spend the
complex.
rest. Yeah, it's extraordinarily complex to navigate it, and they made it that way so that guys like me hopefully couldn't exist. I mean,
But here you
that's
are, growing healthily nonetheless. Oh darn.
yeah. Well, there's just something about, I don't know, people want to eat that healthy food. I think I saw your last week's episode. I think you started it out with something to the effect of, and this might be a good note to wrap this show up on. But I think you started it with a statement that kind of made me chuckle and stuck with me. It's like, so if you've got any friends, family that eat food, and I got a hunch you do, you probably want to pay attention to this. And so, yeah, it's kind of,
Yeah, if you eat, it's important.
if, if, if you eat food and you're looking for nutrient density and ethical production of, plant breeding and higher nutrient dense, and really looking for, the food label that you can actually trust with a fully traceable audit trail. I keep coming back to that because that is just so important to everything that we're doing. I mean, that's really the oh dang it, my phone's going crazy on me here. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. We got you.
No, yeah, all right. But I mean, that's really in my mind, that's the, it, 2 years ago we launched the pilot program. This year we've got like 30,000 acres across the United States growing. Next year we're going for 400,000 acres. So it's coming, folks. I mean, it is coming.
Awesome.
And I'm hoping within 8 months that we have got the food label. And I mean, the going around the USDA with the independent third-party label. It's up to you folks to accept it, and it's up to me to put together a good enough food label that you trusted. And I mean, that's really where we're at right now. And I'm looking at a 3-year, 5-year timeline of getting into 5 to 7 million acres of United States crop production into this higher nutrient dense, naturally bred, identity preserved, completely traceable audit trail, so that people have the choice. And you should just know that you do have the choice. You don't have to just accept what's on the shelf. I'm hoping within 18 months, so that means it'll probably be 24 months, because you know how the world works.
Yep.
That you're actually going to be able to start seeing these things on the shelves. You're going to see fish, in the supermarket that are going to be labeled, high, have this food label on them, from the aquaculture and the higher proteins. And you're going to see beef labeled. You're definitely going to see some of the just things like potato chips as a great example. Healthier soy oils. Yeah, are potato chips healthy for you? No, but can we make them healthier for you? Yeah.
Yes, by far.
Yeah. It's not like we all have to just eat kale to be healthy all the time.
Right.
I mean, sure, go ahead and enjoy a little junk food, but let's just get some more soluble, essential fatty acids, and instead of eating, just nothing but preservatives and sodium in a bag of potato chips, how about you put a little potato in there? And
what a novel idea.
What an amazing idea. Right. And then, instead of, having 13 potato chips per serving to get, 40% of your sodium for the day, you might be able to eat 46 chips per serving to get your sodium for the day. So, there's just a lot of things coming down the pipe. But no, I think I agree with Mr. Justin Gooder. The markets did go crazy today. They went limit up, and actually global strategic food supplies are the shortest they've been in a decade. And with all of the upheaval in the world today, you got a presidential election in contention in the United States.
What a mess.
China's strategic reserves are down to, they basically tapped into them through the trade war, if that's what you want to call it. And you basically cooked the books. The USDA cooked the books for the last 3 years. Farmers got to the point where they were screaming at USDA people when they were coming out saying, "There's no way there's this much grain. There's no way. I
Yep.
mean, there's no way." And so, really, in the last week, I guess the scales are falling from our eyes, and the world is realizing. There's talk that there's going to be dock strikes, union dock worker strikes and transportation strikes at the end of November, 1st of December, either based on COVID and or a number of other factors, things that they want. And so we're looking at a 3-week period where if you're responsible for feeding a country like the European Union, Asia, or India, you are just America has soybeans. The dollar is priced right for trade. The dollar's weak. America is the only country that has soybeans. For the first time in 7 years, Argentina, Brazil, and South America and Chile are buying American soybeans. I mean, they've been our number one competitor trying to. China has been just taking all their soybeans for the last 5 years because they didn't want to buy from the United States. So when South America is buying American soybeans, you know. And actually, the Secretary of State came out today. And usually it's the Secretary of Agriculture. The Secretary of State came out today and talked about strategic grain supplies and strategic reserve of grain supplies. I mean, it's one of the reasons that a lot of people that don't understand the farm program and the farm subsidies. If you ask any farmer, we would just assume let the free market run and get rid of the subsidies. But when they use the product that you grow as a weapon, because make no mistake,
they're weaponizing it.
Yes, food is a weapon. And so, when they tell you you can and can't sell into certain markets, and honestly, if you think about what do we got, a $5 trillion federal budget or something like that, $7 trillion for like 26 billion last year. They just took control of the basically global and American food supply. My point is 26 billion is a lot of money. Don't misunderstand, but it's like 0.01% of our overall budget. And in order to control the food supply, for better or for worse, that's Eisenhower put this in place after World War II. I mean, that's really where it stretches back to. It's about strategic reserves and paying farmers to. It was paying farmers to not farm, and then paying farmers to overproduce.
It's the Cold War extended basically through food, right? Like.
You're exactly right. And I mean, when the Secretary of State comes out and says, I don't know if we're going to ship you any more soybeans, China. America might need to hold on to those soybeans. And, the first thing that happens is the American farmer goes, "What are you talking about? I got to sell these soybeans for $14 to China. I mean, markets are going limit up, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Let me make a buck finally." And so then the United States government comes in and goes, "I tell you what, we'll just pay you that money and we'll put those grain stocks over in our strategic reserve." So without diving into the entire farm program, it's when they weaponize that, if you produced pencils for a living and the United States government came in and said you couldn't sell pencils in 1/3 of the global markets, guess what? It would make your pencils worth a hell of a lot less because you've just shrunk your market share, So it's a deeper subject than that, but yeah, he's exactly right on the target there that Justin Githers. And I got to get up and sell beans in the morning, and I think I'm probably with him on that. And maybe in the next episode or two, we can jump a little bit into maybe just giving a brief explanation of why and what. It's such a screwed up system that it's nobody that works in it or around it likes it. Nobody likes it. Farmers, consumers, nobody. But when you really step back and take a look at I mean, forgetting about GMOs, non-GMOs, regenerative, all that stuff for a minute, when you're just talking about basically straight up survival of strategic reserves of food supplies and grains are one of the, because they last. I mean, you can store corn for 10 years if you store it right, and it's going to be essentially not quite as good as it was the first 3 years, but it's not going to go rotten.
Right.
Beans you can store 3 years, roughly, and soybeans don't quite have the storability of corn. That's why they're a little bit more volatile than corn is. Corn holds pretty steady because of that reason. But that whole just basically farm program is just one giant cluster F, but it's really not a farm program. It's more of a strategic, weaponized military program.
Well, it goes back. It goes back to the perpetual. For national security, right? Like, and ignoring the human factor.
You nailed it right on the head. In fact, it's one of the things that's wrong. It's one of the major issues with our food supply is that our government views it as a weapon and not as as you put it. The pharmacy, the pharmacy spelled with an F. Let the food be thy medicine. No. To the United States government, the food is thy weapon. And that's part of the reason that if you ever get frustrated looking at it, going, what's going on? Why are we subsidizing all these farmers? Jiminy Christmas. I believe me, I'm as frustrated with it as anybody else. I really don't collect many subsidies. I'm not a conventional grain farmer.
Yeah.
I sell all my products direct to other farmers.
You created a market that you can sell to directly, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I've been around ag long enough to understand why those I guess what you'd call rules and regs are in place. They need a ton of work, and I mean, like, you could ever get Congress to agree on change in the farm bill to anything that made sense. I mean, that would never happen ever in a million years. But it is what we have for now. But no, I think we've pretty well covered a nice array of topics here. You got anything else you want to jump into tonight, quick?
Man, we sure did. We sure covered a bunch of awesome stuff, Brad. I really appreciate all your insight and all your information. You really are well versed in so many things, and you're so directly tied to this. It's so great to hear from you. Do you have anything you want to? I know you probably want to plug your channel. Is there anything else you want to tell people for the listeners or people who are going to be watching this later on? And also, I don't know how we can engage more people in the food conversation, but did you feel like you got pretty good feedback out of the chat tonight about what people would like to see on the food labels and food supply wise?
Very like I say, I've been hunting around for a couple of channels very similar to this. Very, very impressed with the conversations. Very educated comments. All asking incredibly intelligent questions and engaged, which is nice. Nobody's throwing shade at anybody. Everybody seems to be on the same page. We can disagree on issues and talk through them. And I would say everybody in the comments and anybody that's been kind of listening to this know that Carlton and myself are going to be in more communications, and we're going to start kind of streamlining and professionalizing this message a little bit more as it comes around. And we really, everybody in the message, reach out to 3 or 4 people and ask the same questions we're asking you, because now is the time. CRISPR's coming down the pipe. We've got this is the time to voice your opinions on that. And there's so much going on in the world of agriculture. This is really kind of a transformative moment in the world of ag. This is if we miss this opportunity, we may look back in 15, 20 years and go, damn, we had a chance to save it all, but instead we ignored it and went the other way. We couldn't get enough people engaged. So I would just encourage everybody to get as engaged as you possibly can and come back to the Farmacy Seeds Network and encourage a couple other people to come. Sure, go check out my channel, Grow the Farm Up. Your videos are much better, but if you want just some raw, just unedited
real
content
info,
about what's up,
yeah,
density, so yeah, swing by Grow the Farm Up, and there's, I don't know, there's like 80 videos on there now that cover a variety of things from A to Z. And some stuff is a little bit of, I try to keep opinions out of it, but some stuff is opinion. Some stuff we dive into GMOs on my channel and non-GMOs, and we talk about irrigation and responsible aquifer management. We really jump into showing you guys what regenerative farming on a large scale looks like. And that's something that, there's so many farm channels out there watching tractors drive back and forth.
It's tiring. It's tiring.
And sure, if it's your thing, that's good fun, but I mean, I'm not here to show you tractors driving back and forth. I'm here to show you, hey, look at my cover crop. Let's go dig around and see. And this is how I applied it. And this is what I did. And this is what it's doing. And this is why. And this is how regenerative farming works. And here, this is, we drilled this cover crop in the fall. And here, take a look at these higher nutrient dense soybeans being harvested. See them for yourself with your own two eyes. Be one of the first to look at them. And so, yeah, swing on by both channels. And I mean, I'm impressed with Farmacy Seeds Network channel and the way you've stewarded it. And like I say, the best thing that I think we could really do is encourage everybody listening to say, to take a good long look at what's coming down the pipeline and which side of history do you want to be on. I think that's probably the best way to leave it.
Weigh in on it, and yeah, let's build the future we want to see instead of look back and regret what we did in the past.
Couldn't agree more, man. I think that's a great ending message, and you and I'll be in touch as we have been, and hopefully we'll see what next week and the week after brings. Maybe we'll do this up again if folks in the chat want to get in touch with you, or on your channel get in touch with you and want to do it one more time. I wouldn't mind if some folks got together and put some questions together, and or really wanted to drill down what they want to see in the food labels themselves. I'm curious, how deep do you want us to go?
That would be great. Maybe I could do a spot on my, I have a MeWe account, which is sort of like Facebook, but it's private and no ads and no data mining. Maybe I'll organize a discussion over there if people are interested, and we can kind of, get some more, question type information, like you say, dig into it more. I'm sorry I didn't mean to interrupt you again, but.
No, that's perfectly fine. And in fact, anywhere we can find folks that are interested in just finding the healthiest possible food that we can grow. I mean, it's kind of a fledgling industry that has a glimmer of hope, and I mean, all of the solutions to our problems seem like they're lying right up over that horizon. And we just got to drag the world with us up over that horizon, even if we got to throw them on our backs and drag them with us, kicking and screaming sometimes. Once they get there, they see the benefits of it. And we just got to get switched to regenerative practices. I mean, so much topsoil running off, so much water contamination. So it's just that the evidence is undisputable at this point.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and I think everybody in the comment section is here to really kind of learn and see and go, what the heck are these two guys doing? And let's, are they making any sense? And I think we're making at least 70% sense, which is pretty good for just winging it.
I would agree.
If you live it every day and know it every day and wake up and breathe it and eat it and sleep it every day, you can kind of just regurgitate it whenever you're called upon, because you're not reading cue cards. It's been ingrained in your brain for 10 years. I mean, that's a big difference too. I mean, you don't see much what's the word I'm looking for, sincerity anymore.
Yeah.
Most people are
authenticity. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of the Instagram filter of life, now we're gonna discuss the hard topics. We're gonna let you know when there's shit coming your way that you might want to watch out for. And honestly, there's enough of it coming at you that we're gonna try to beat it there with a food label that you can trust, and let us know what you want on that label. Let us know how deep that we need to go. I mean, and like we discussed earlier, I mean, that information not priceless, and is that, I mean, that value in and of itself, not only to mention the product itself, but the value of actually knowing what's in there with that food label. That was one of the first things I really jumped on 6-7 years ago when I started going, really starting to see the nutrient density crank up in through my natural selection breeding with regenerative farming practices. I went, okay, now how do I prove it to people?
Yeah.
So
that was a big stumbling block for me too, and it was kind of like, well, I guess I got to go out and grow it, and then I got to document it really well with video, and that seems to speak to people. And then that authenticity, man, boy, people really connect to that and resonate with it.
Yeah, no, it's been a great conversation, and I tell you what, I appreciate everybody in the comments jumping on tonight. And I'll probably, like I say, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, you can either comment me on my channel and I'll get back at you, or get in touch with Carlton. He's got my email address. I'm pretty easy to get along with. If anybody's actually really looking for some of these genetics and wants to try them, yeah, I do it all the time. Let's all you got to do is get in touch with me, and we go from there. And so yeah, I'd say just get think on it a little bit yourself, and one person tells two people tells four people. That's how a guy with a Motorola cell phone just starts shooting video and doesn't edit it, and next thing you know, you got a few hundred people watching every video you put out about 8-9 months later. So
yeah.
Apparently doing something right there, because it's definitely not the quality of the channel. People are coming back.
Well, it's not about the look. It's not about a shiny sports car. It's about the message, right?
You're right. Yeah. Well, one of these days, maybe I'll wise up and actually start to. I do have a whole marketing and PR department just for my business. Just maybe I ought to have them start working on my YouTube account, huh?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. You mentioned some kind of a partnership or thing too, so maybe we could talk about that at some point too. I don't know what you were looking about or thinking about. But.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the other thing about this side of agriculture. Every year I make dozens of new partnerships, friends, and contractors. Definitely. I mean, and you're sitting in an area that is just really, it's you're sitting in the area that is. I envy your marketing position if they ever opened the damn restaurant back up.
Yeah.
You're sitting right there, man. We get you the nutrient density stuff, and you walk in with the best stuff that anybody's ever seen, and you win, man.
Yeah, I've already seen that on the small scale. Like I serve a few small restaurants with a few select things, and it's like, I basically went in matching the price of their organic, whatever they were buying through whoever. I matched their price, and it's hands down. They're like, anytime we can get from you, we want from you.
Yeah. Oh well, you've got a very good foliar program. I mean, I've heard you discuss it before. It's basically a little bit different, but it's pretty much the exact same principles of what I'm doing with mine. And I mean, it is the right way to do it. There's no question about it.
It was just a quick bootstrap for, how can I get plant health up fast, and that was the easy way to do it, and then build soils while I try and get plant health up as quick as I can. It was like, all right,
Yeah,
let's just turn it up.
It was a smart way to do it. It really was. I mean, it was a completely different approach. A lot of people would have gone to putting fertility and commercial fertilizers into the soil, and you went with foliar and cover crop. In a 2 or 3 year period, you're going to see larger payoffs for the first couple of years. It's impressive that you figured it out to this point and have got it to where you've got it. Really, I'm surprised you're growing as much quality as you are, basically only on a foliar system. That's pretty impressive. That ought to tell you the quality or the potential of cover crops.
Yeah, yeah. Well, most of that information came from John Kempf and Advanced Eco Agriculture. I just learned so much from those guys about the powerful effects you can have with foliar feeds. And I had read on foliar feeds before, but this is a whole nother level of targeted feeding. It just, when I saw the results, I couldn't, same like you said, when you switch to regeneratives, you just like, right off the bat, you're like, wow, I've been doing it wrong. Like.
Right. That's exactly right. And I think Kemp just put out another video, not too long ago, where he interviewed I forget, what is it, Mark Haney, the guy who invented the Haney soil test.
Yep. That was a good one.
That's the only soil test I've run for 3 years now. It's the best soil test. It takes 24 hours, and it measures the amount of carbon dioxide that your soil basically
is exchanging, basically, right?
There you go. Yeah, and that really tells you the nutrient availability of your soil, much more so than pulling these university cores and telling me what my NP and K are.
Yeah.
Test is revolutionary. It really is. But no, I tell you what, I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. I appreciate you having me on the show. I think we covered a lot of topics. We answered a lot of questions. We got a lot of good feedback. And I think let's probably, at least for me, I'm calling it a night here, folks.
Yeah.
Feel free to visit my channel. Feel free to visit Farmacy Seeds Network and comment on any of our videos. If you got any ideas and you got anything you want to share, you got anything else, food labels, think on that. I mean, that's a big one. Think on that for a few days and comment back to us. I'd be curious what you guys all think. But appreciate you guys listening. Appreciate you having me on. And I will leave you guys with that, and have a good evening, CJ.
Hey, you too, Brad. Thank you very much for coming on. I hope you have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Good show, man. Thanks.
Right. Thank you.
And
take care.
Yep. And thanks to everybody in the chat. All right. We'll see you guys.
All right. Thanks. So there you go, people. That was an excellent discussion. Thank you all for coming in the chat. Thank you guys for your feedback, for your love and support. Vinny Barbarino, thank you for the super chat. Do greatly appreciate that. I hope everyone has a great night. This is an hour and 15 minutes over the usual time for the show here. I hope you got some extra bonus out of this one. That's all for the show tonight, guys. I got to go make some dinner and get to sleep and get up tomorrow and take care of business. So I hope you all have a great evening. I'll leave you with a little bit of nice video and some audio.